They came from beyond the world, from over the world, from under the world. They came from inside the stars and from behind the rain. They came from the known lands, and they came from the secret places of old. The vast ones who drank of the nebulae, the small ones who did not care what happened beyond the banks of their rivers, the ones who bathed in the light and the ones who watched from the shadows, the ones who loved us and the ones who forgot about us, the ones who hate us now and the ones who love us still, the ones who sung with the rats and the ones who swam with the leviathans. They came from far and near. They came one and all. They came to end the world. As you may already know from our previous video in this series, a mysterious being known only as the Harbinger unlocked SCP-001 The Lock and brought about the Omnipocalypse. Every single world-destroying XK-class scenario on the books, from Foundation files to the most ancient mythological tomes, and some we'd never even imagined, began to come true. A world flooded with terrifying anomalous activity, from unfurling skies to giant nightmarish animals, was about where we left off. Now it's time to open your eyes and wake up. This is the kind of nightmare you can't encounter while you're asleep. SCP-5720, the astronomically inclined crane, went about its daily work. The small mechanical crane always occupied itself with the one task that gave its existence any meaning: arranging esoteric model solar systems. But something was different today. SCP-5720 put the final touches on its latest model, and then lifted its mechanical arm skywards, pointing directly into the vast and starry infinity above. But were they stars? No, not today. As SCP-5720 looked up at the sky, this time, the sky looked back. They weren't stars, they were eyes. Something was coming towards Earth from the furthest reaches of the outer dark. An armada of world-enders, coming from above, below, and all around. A whole cosmos of supremely powerful beings, zeroing in on our pale blue dot. A thought crossed through whatever passed as the mind of this strange little crane.
Today is the day your prayers will be answered.
Followed by another word, ringing loud and clear and holy as a mighty church bell.
Awaken.
And at that moment, everything did. Thousands of miles away, a new god landed on Earth, appearing like a great wall of dense, matted fur descending from the sky. Ur-An-Um, the mother of the ones that came before. After eons of absence, she had eventually returned to greet her children, the true rulers and stewards of this land. But Ur-An-Um was surprised and horrified by what she saw. Their great cities, their sprawling structures, their beautiful art and advanced culture, all gone, laid to waste by the worthless, hairless apes that once lurked in the forests with the other animals. Something had happened. Something had changed. The humans had slaughtered her people, destroyed their accomplishments, tarnished their legacy, driven the few that were left out of their kingdoms and into the forests, treated them as mere animals, and built their hideous concrete cities over their bones. And they had the gall to call them Bigfoot, or SCP-1000, because thanks to them, their beautiful true name had been lost to time. She looked skywards and cried out in despair and anguish at the loss of her children, inconsolable. But then she felt something, a glimmer of hope in her mind, the possibility that things would change, that the humans would be toppled from their thrones and true justice would be achieved. She called out to her remaining children, and her children answered. Across the globe, another great entity awoke, deep underneath a mountain. When it stirred into life and broke free, it shattered the entire mountain on top of it, as easily as you or me displacing a bedsheet. It took to the skies, massive but unseeable to the human eye. It soared through the air, gazing down upon the world it hadn't seen for thousands of years. Once it had feasted on the blood sacrifices of human subjects hoping to avoid its wrath. But humans weren't the petty little group of huddled cavemen that they had once been. Now they were in their billions, gathered in impossibly large settlements. The entity sought to find a seat of power that it could influence, but now it was spoiled for choice. Eventually, it zeroed in and found its perfect target, an SCP Foundation containment site. Here it would find a new form to take, and more petty, pathetic humans to bring under its mighty thrall. It landed in SCP-765, the Duck Pond. It is an anomalous pond that is, you guessed it, full of ducks, and initially induces feelings of serenity in its victims, before later inducing not-so-pleasant feelings. When the entity plummeted into the water, it began to absorb and bond with the anomaly, growing to epic sizes as it assumed a form that the minds of us feeble humans could comprehend. A giant, terrifying duck. It released a mighty earth-shaking quack as it plodded across the countryside to cause mayhem elsewhere. In Europe, more violent madness was unfolding. A crimson rooster cawed, then a golden rooster, and then a rooster of soot red. Anyone with a basic knowledge of Norse mythology was shaking in their boots as a mighty beast stirred in the heart of a desolate cave. The chains that had once held the monstrous dog in place now broke. It rose and licked its jagged fangs, excited to stain them with the blood of its enemies. It was the great hound Fenrir, omen of the end times, here to herald the end of all things. A trumpet boomed across the globe with no apparent source. People in the streets in New York, Delhi, London, Cape Town, and countless other towns, cities, and hamlets the world over paused and listened in confusion. Below them, the great and terrible Jormungandr, the thought-to-be mythological Midgard serpent, stirred from its previously eternal slumber and began to uncoil its body. The shifting caused earthquakes and tsunamis along the coast of Greenland, as towns and villages crumbled, killing thousands. Fenrir stalked along the length of Denmark, slaughtering and devouring anyone or anything unlucky enough to cross its path. But it did not wage its war against mankind alone. Behind it, a hellish army of burning giants marched, mighty hands clutching molten weapons. Ragnarok was upon us now. Odin save us all. And the administrator slept. She was the latest in a long line of Foundation staff members to hold that hallowed position. And in the dark vistas of her dreams, a predecessor approached her. He wasn't the old bearded man in the heavy coat that she remembered. Now he was wearing a 1950s suit and a fedora hat and carrying a briefcase. That's right, he'd taken up the mantle of SCP-990, also known as the Dream Man. He's a mysterious figure that appears to members of the Foundation in their dreams, warning them of impending disasters that they may be able to narrowly prevent if his warning is heeded, though it often comes at some terrible cost to the recipient of his message. This time, however, his message carried a different tone. He told the current administrator that there was no way to stop the apocalypse from occurring this time, only making sure that the particular shape of the apocalypse would be the one most favorable to the Foundation and humanity's joint interests. All this was devastating news that the new administrator saw as a grievous betrayal of both the Foundation's stances and humanity as a whole. She refused to accept the idea that the apocalypse was inevitable, even coming from the mouth of a former administrator. As far as she was concerned, this Dream Man no longer worked on the side of the Foundation. He was in league with the World Enders, and she refused to take his deal. The SCP Foundation would save this world from the horrors the Lock unleashed, or they would slide into the darkness with it. They would never work against the human race. SCP-343, also known as God, awoke in his cell in Site-17. The time for fun and games with the humans at the Foundation had come and gone. He was going by his true name, Yahweh now. He blinked, and in that same instant, he was at Site-0, the containment site for another SCP-001, the legendary Gate Guardian. All the staff around them looked upon Yahweh in shock, awed by the reality warper's sudden appearance and unable to do anything about it. But really, 343 was no mere reality warper, like some had expected. 343 truly was a god. He just didn't happen to be the only one in play. When the Gate Guardian saw Yahweh now standing before him, he lowered his sword, spread his fiery wings, and took a knee in great reverence. Yahweh spoke calmly, but with unshakable authority.
Uriel, it is time. Open the gate. Lead my armies across the earth.
The Gate Guardian Uriel responded in its booming voice.
I hear and obey, my Lord and my God.
For the first time in recorded memory, The grand gate that Uriel had always been guarding opened, revealing thousands of legions of warrior angels waiting on the other side. They were impossibly beautiful and powerful creatures, each one a vibrant, glowing chaos of wings and eyes, wielding pure white swords and singing resounding hymns of war. Soon the air was thick with a chorus of rustling wings as the angels loosened themselves from the gate's mouth, led by Uriel as Yahweh's general into the global fray. Meanwhile, back at Site 10, another SCP-001, the item that started all of this, the lock, was entering its next stage of grand cosmic evolution. Something within the lock suddenly unfurled, causing a shockwave that killed everyone at the site and destroying the entire building in an instant. Except in that same instant, all of the Site 10 staff and the building itself reappeared completely unharmed in a field in New Hampshire. Back where Site 10 used to be, the lock was doing some terraforming. The ground split open beneath into a mighty valley, the likes of which Earth had never seen before. Lush greenery sprouted within, and thousands of strange alien creatures soon populated this new place. In the center, the lock just floated in place. They were now ready for the first meeting to take place. Over at Site 2036, Dr. Everett Mann was working on a number of SCP-098 specimens. These are frightening creatures reminiscent of spider crabs, with blades instead of pincers and a natural ability to mimic the sounds of their prey. He was studying the creatures when he got a call, asking him if the specimens had acted up at all. They had already had sudden containment breaches for SCP-995, a type of dangerous carnivorous fungi, and SCP-616, a mysterious airplane with satanic elements to it. Just as Dr. Mann was about to reply, the 098 specimens metamorphosized into many winged flying creatures, which flew out of the chamber with such force that they busted through walls. Sirens blared all through the facility, and Dr. Mann joined the many other confused and frustrated Foundation staff members wandering the building, wondering just what the hell was going on today. They were getting bizarre reports of unprecedented anomalous activity from all over the world, with no explanation uniting it all. According to panicked whispers across the facility, Emergency Order Patmos was now in effect, whatever that meant. The true nature of what was going on here went over most of the heads of the SCP Foundation's staff. That's when Mann encountered Dr. Charles Ogden Gears, who, for such a famously emotionless man, looked surprisingly worried. Dr. Mann tried to downplay the situation, saying they were only looking at a handful of containment breaches here, nothing they hadn't handled before. Dr. Gears shut him down with trademark coldness. Feeling a little more nervous now, Dr. Everett Mann asked what else had gotten out. With steely eyes, Dr. Gears replied, "A whole damn lot." The smell of fire and oil fills the air. The sound of gears grinding can be heard between the explosions and shrieks of terror. A man runs out of his house, only to have his leg grabbed by a metal arm and dragged back through his front door. SCP-001 leaves a trail of metal fragments and mechanical parts on the ground in the wake of its destruction. Iron chains swing from its form. Cast iron gears whirl within it. A glowing light throbs from the center of its body. SCP-001 is consuming everything in its path. After incorporating the truck chassis into its being, SCP-001 rolls in a lumbering fashion to the next house. It rips the gutters from the side of the building. Residents who live in the area flee their neighborhood, all the while hoping that the mechanical monstrosity skips over their house, so they have something to return to if they make it out alive. A section of SCP-001's undercarriage drops away from the main body. It rolls down the street, consuming more and more material. The new entity resembles a human spine and rib cage. It topples over, unable to support itself. The rib-like formations extend out to grab anything and everything within reach. The newly incorporated material forms what can only be described as a head. Light from within the eye sockets fixate on nearby civilians. The metallic creature picks up the people and places them inside its exposed steel ribcage. Then it turns and spots a woman helplessly trying to crawl away. The creature reaches out with a spiked tentacle and wraps it around the woman's body. She is placed inside of the chest cavity. Moments later, a severed hand falls out of the entity and onto the ground. The mechanical monster continues to gather bodies and materials, incorporating them into its frame. A growth begins to slowly expand on its back. It becomes so massive that the creature falls over and uses its limbs to scurry to a nearby house. There is a sickening crunching sound as the growth bursts. From within emerges 3 humanoid creatures resembling the civilians that the entity had consumed earlier. A female with chains extending from her scalp like dreadlocks stumbles away. The second humanoid is a man with cogs for limbs. He examines the clock-like components that have been incorporated into his body, then stares blankly into the distance. The third humanoid lies motionless on the ground. He did not make it. The 2 functioning humanoids look at their creator intently. For a moment, nothing moves. Then, as if they have been given orders telepathically, the half-human, half-machine humanoids turn and run away from the mayhem. A few weeks before the massacre caused by what would be designated as SCP-001, the Foundation had been in contact with the Allied Occult Initiative. There were rumors of an anomalous object in Mexico being worshipped by a group of people who identified themselves as the Church of the Broken God. Intel about the church claimed their deity was a small mechanical box filled with cogs and pistons. The box supposedly had supernatural abilities. It was said to be able to communicate with congregants of the Church of the Broken God telepathically. The devout worshipped the box, following any order it gave, and in return they were filled with an emotion that could be only described as divine. As World War II rages on in Europe, the Foundation sends agents to recover anomalies in Mexico that might help with the war effort. While there, the Foundation force is tasked with learning about the Church of the Broken God. They are also ordered to investigate a town near La Paz, where there are troubling accounts of a mechanical anomalous creature causing mayhem. The agents make their way through Mexico, gathering various objects to bring back to Foundation sites in the United States. The unit loads all of the anomalies they recovered onto a train, with a plan to check out the stories of the mechanical anomaly they've heard about as they make their way to the US border. The train heads north along rusted rails. Just outside La Paz, they've come across a broken-down train filled with what looks to be refugees. When the Foundation unit goes to investigate, they find all of the refugees repeating the same words over and over again, but they don't understand. The Foundation agents look at one another confused, until one of them translates the words into English. The words the refugees are saying over and over again are, La Máquina, the machine. The commanding officer orders a squad of Foundation agents to proceed up the tracks, to see if they can figure out what has the refugees so scared. They make their way towards La Paz, disappearing over the horizon. As the sun sets, the remaining Foundation agents hear gunshots in the distance. They stay awake all night, remaining vigilant, waiting for the exploratory squad, but morning comes without anyone returning. 3 days later, the Foundation force still has not seen anything since the exploratory squad left. Then, as the sun sits lazily in the morning sky, a lone figure is spotted walking down the tracks towards the trains. One of the agents on watch blows his whistle and points to the figure. A squad of agents rushes towards the shadow of a man. Their guns are raised, ready for anything. The figure drops to the ground and begins to crawl along the tracks. The agents reach the fallen man, only to find that he is one of their squad mates who has been sent up the tracks to investigate La Paz several days before. The agent's name is DeMarco. He is covered in blood. His clothes are in tatters and he has lost a boot. DeMarco lies on his back with Foundation agents standing around him. His eyes are wide and wild. He keeps babbling on about a world eater, how the rest of his squad had been mulched, and he is the only one who made it out alive. The Foundation agents carry DeMarco back to the makeshift base they created by the trains. They need to figure out a way to get the convoy moving again, but whatever is up ahead has already taken out an entire Foundation squad. It had to be something anomalous, but what could it possibly be? The unit of Foundation agents prepare to move towards La Paz. They start loading their rifles and check the amount of ammunition and explosives available in case the containment process gets out of hand. Just as they are about to leave the base, a convoy appears on the horizon. It is an Allied Occult Initiative force preparing to attack whatever it is that is devastating La Paz. This organization's mission is to not secure, contain, or protect, but to destroy. The Foundation may be in over their heads on this one, and the joint force with the Allied Occult Initiative may be the only way to stop what is now known as SCP-001. The AOI and Foundation force gears up for battle. They set out for La Paz, and what they find causes them to quake with fear. SCP-001 has consumed so much material, it is the size of a mountain. It moves like a tidal wave of mechanical destruction, washing over the buildings and landscape under it.
Whatever SCP-001 passes over is consumed and added to its massive body. SCP-001 started as a small mechanical box with cogs, but now has morphed into a gigantic metal death machine. The Church of the Broken God has finally met their maker, as the small entity they once worshipped has now consumed all of its members. Their god is an all-consuming monster. The AOI and Foundation forces do everything they can to stop SCP-001 from continuing its reign of destruction. They fire barrage after barrage of bullets and explosives into the mechanical anomaly. They bring in air support to try and damage it from the skies, but nothing works. The AOI uses an artifact in their possession to lure SCP-001 to the coast of the Pacific Ocean, where a trap has been set for the so-called god. The monstrous mechanical creature moves slowly towards the water. It consumes abandoned cars, buildings, and boats as it approaches the coastline. It even shovels large amounts of earth into its form, causing flames to spurt out from its inner workings. Smoke bellows from openings between different mechanical components, like a volcano before it is about to erupt. Suddenly, seemingly from nowhere, a massive cloud with a reddish tint appears in the sky. Air raid sirens can be heard in the distance. The enormous cloud begins to pulsate. Streaks of lightning shoot through the red mist in the sky. It now sits directly over SCP-001. From within the cloud, part of a ship can be seen. It appears to be slightly damaged. Electricity flows over its hull. The vessel in the giant red cloud is classified as SCP-2399. The underside of the vessel begins to glow aqua blue. A blinding beam of light is ejected from SCP-2399, which penetrates straight down and through SCP-001. For a moment, everything is still. There is complete silence. Then, as if SCP-001 is trying to reach up and grab the vessel above it, a mechanical bulge reaches out. Before SCP-001 can grab the vessel above, there is another bright flash of light. SCP-2399 blinks out of existence. The sound of grinding gears can be heard coming from within SCP-001. It begins to shed its outer layers of metal. Then, the entire structure that was SCP-001 collapses into the water and onto the beach. Giant cogs fall from the sky. Parts of vehicles embed themselves in the sand. As the Foundation and AOI agents approach the piles of scrap metal and mechanical components, they see that some of them are still moving. It is as if an invisible power source is still pulsating through some of the machinery. The agents of the Foundation celebrate the destruction of the giant mechanical beast, but little do they know this was only a piece of the entity worshipped as the Broken God. The Foundation agents collect as many of the still moving parts as they can. They find spinning gears, twitching pulleys, and firing pistons. As the parts are separated from one another and carried away from the main wreckage of SCP-001, they slowly stop moving and become inactive. Some of the artifacts recovered were identified as being connected to the Church of the Broken God. These artifacts are found closer to the middle of what was once a mountain-sized SCP-001. Hundreds of anomalous artifacts are collected and transported to SCP Foundation sites. Collecting the broken parts of SCP-001 is relatively safe. However, some agents get too close to the larger moving parts, getting caught in them and losing a body part or two. But most agents proceed with caution and survive the collection ordeal with their arms and legs still attached to their bodies. Dive teams are sent into the water to recover parts that have sunk to the bottom of the sea. One of the divers is a local from the area. He is hired to bring up the heart of the machine, since he is an experienced diver used to freediving to great depths to collect oysters from the bottom of the bay. The diver enters the water and swims down into the murky depths. He secures straps around the heart of SCP-001 and pulls hard on the rope, as an indication to the surface that it is ready to be hauled up. The salvage team on the surface begins to pull. There is a second slight tug on the rope, then it goes slack. The team continues to pull. When they get the heart to the surface, they are horrified at what else comes up with it. Tangled in the ropes is the lifeless body of the diver. His head is smashed between two moving pieces of the heart. It looks as if he shoved his head between the slabs of metal himself. The salvage team untangles the body, rolls it off the deck, and back into the ocean. The mechanical box, which was the heart of SCP-001, is offloaded on the shore, but as the Foundation prepares to move it to a containment facility, the weather starts to deteriorate. Hurricane-force winds sweeps across the water and batter the coast. The heart is kept in a secured storage warehouse until it can be moved. The people living in the village nearby complain of hearing voices and rashes so itchy that they practically tear their skin off. Once the storm passes, the Foundation agents load the heart onto a ship. It is to be transported to a Foundation site just across the border. The ocean seems calm and serene. The Foundation ship undocks and begins its journey up the coast. Not too long after beginning its journey, the ship slowly drifts off course. It is as if the crew has stopped manning their posts, and the ship is being controlled by a mind of its own. The Foundation ship crashes and sinks somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, never to be found. And most importantly, the heart of SCP-001 doesn't make it to the Foundation site. Years later, a man is walking along the beach. He hears something. It sounds like someone pounding on a large drum to the rhythm of a heartbeat. The man walks towards the sound. Something is drawing him forward, closer and closer to the heartbeat. He walks and walks until the beating stops. He bends down and moves the sand aside. He spots the corner of a mechanical box sticking out of the white sand. The man digs deeper and pulls out the small box. Inside, he can see gears whirling and pistons firing. He holds the box close to his own heart. It seems to speak to him. The man brings the box back to town. He starts to worship the box, and soon more and more people in the area join the new religion. They cast aside their own beliefs and focus on the powerful entity contained within the box. God is not dead, at least not yet. But the prophecies of the Church of the Broken God say that when the heart is found, the God will reassemble itself once again. Then the unbroken God will destroy all other false deities, until only he remains.
What the heck is consensus reality? And is it really the answer to everything? You may have seen us mention the subject before. Consensus reality, after all, is what the SCP Foundation is trying to preserve in the face of ever-increasing anomalous activity. A kind of truth or normalcy that all of us can agree on. Pick 10 people at random and ask them, what color is the sky? What gaseous element is produced by trees? Has every US president since Washington secretly been an alien reptile in disguise? The answer will, or at least should, be blue, oxygen, and no. This is consensus reality. But no, not really. Yes, in a more casual sense, the state of reality to which we all agree could be a viable definition of the term consensus reality. But you likely don't remember being called upon for a vote along with the rest of humanity on what is and isn't quote-unquote normal. That's because consensus reality isn't the consensus of everyone. It's the consensus of the most powerful beings alive, the O5 Council. In this instance, SCP-001 is the ever-updating document that records exactly what normal is. But perhaps even more important is that anything that exists outside the Council's most recent definition of normal is targeted for containment. While at face value it seems less flashy than something like the Gate Guardian or the terrifying Scarlet King, or the insane twists and turns of the Ouroboros cycle, the document defining consensus reality, despite being the only thing on the database to be given the classification non-anomalous, is about as foundational as Foundation documents get. Literally everything currently in containment is there because this document deems it so. It is the SCP Foundation's 10 commandments of containment, and thou shalt contain. If this document was ever leaked, it could lead to a complete broken masquerade scenario, where the anomalous cat is let fully out of the bag. Only the O5 Council has access to the document, and it's only through consensus that additions, alterations, or removals can be made. Naturally, it's a document that's in extremely high demand among the anomalous community, because it answers the big question that every anomalous individual has. If I'm not even dangerous, if I've committed no crime that would necessitate the locking up of a non-anomalous human, why am I still being contained? And don't worry, today we're going to answer that question, or rather, the O5 Council will. But let's return to the Council themselves. We've covered them and their many interpretations before, from them being a group of fantastical, immortal demigods to being a frightening hive mind, to being a shadowy faction of mysterious, emotionless bureaucrats, constantly conniving and undermining each other to gain just that little bit more power. But what's more frightening? The keys to normality being in the hands of these larger-than-life fantastical figures, or in the hands of human beings, just as valuable and afraid as the rest of us, with only the knowledge of the strange things going on behind the curtain to protect them from the truly unknowable. The O5 Council holds meetings with some regularity where they ask themselves and each other whether any new developments in the wider world require changes to the new normal. It is up to the O5 Council to define the difference between universal laws, gravitation, physical forces, and basic chemistry, biology, sociology, psychology, technology, and philosophy, and the kind of crackpot theories being spouted by people on street corners carrying "the end is nigh" signs. Some of their decisions are quite simple. Can a new development be explained by the laws of an existing non-anomalous framework? If so, the rules need not be changed. The current paradigm of our understanding can rest neatly in place, but other decisions fall into a gray area. In order to illustrate this, we're going to do something unprecedented. We're going to go into the actual boardroom of the O5 Council and see exactly what decisions they made about our consensus reality, the one that you and I are living in right now. We're going to look at 3 different meetings, one from 1932, another from 1945, and an example from as recently as 2014. So what really goes on in the discussions that define what we all would consider normal? The 1932 discussion was spurred on by strange development happening in the United Kingdom. New forms of occult-adjacent witchcraft and spiritualism were beginning to take off, descended largely from traditional pagan and Wicca beliefs. The fact that some of these believers were actually attempting spells was enough to catch the Foundation's all-seeing eye, and the matter was discussed by the O5 Council. O5-3 said, "Why are we even covering this? There are traditional beliefs in cultures throughout history that we do not consider anomalous. We must not use our position to threaten the right of humanity to believe." With a stern look, O5-7 replied, "Except this does not extend from traditional practices. This new witchcraft is a modern invention, developed through a scholarly rereading of practices as an alternative to Christianity. It is not a continuation, and practitioners are attempting spell casting." O5-5 chimed in with, "Soon you'll say Aleister Crowley has something to do with it. The document is clear. Theurgy is anomalous. Religion and spirituality are not. Show me proof that they are casting spells that cannot be explained under rigorous testing, and I will personally see to containing those spells myself. Until then, no. Just as Thelema is allowed, so shall this witchcraft. For God's sake, we'll allow Satanism as long as they aren't channeling demonic energies." O5-1, the most senior member of the council, nodded and said, "Agreed. Furthermore, we will need all the faith we can muster against the Theurgic traditions. We never know when a new faith will assist in our cause." No updates to consensus reality were made. In 1945, an event of far greater magnitude took place. The use of terrifying new weapons by the US military in Hiroshima and Nagasaki that resulted in the deaths of over 200,000 people. The council converged to discuss the earth-shattering event and what their reaction to it should be. Shaking, O5-2 said, "Thank you for responding to my emergency call. Trinity has happened. I can barely contain what I saw. It was like the sun rising from the desert sand, a dawn of destruction and fire that lasted for miles around. I cannot believe that such an explosion could ever be seen as possible. Tales and prior evidence of the summoning of gods have had less impact. I tremble with fear about the possibility of people wielding this kind of power, the ability to level a city with the flick of a switch." O5-4 replied, "Weren't the Germans and Russians also developing this technology? We are at war, and this sort of escalation happens." O5-5 said, "May I remind my esteemed colleagues that we are not at war? The United States, Japan, they are at war. We are not nations. Now, the question stands, is this anomalous? Do the physical effects follow from the mathematical concepts?" O5-7 said, They do follow. Scientific testing was completed each and every step of the way to reach this point. I do not believe this is anomalous, no matter how frightening the repercussions are." O5-2, still understandably worked up, said, "What, you're just going to let people hold on to the keys to their own destruction? We have fought tooth and nail to keep such capabilities out of the reach of man, and now you're saying we should abandon our purpose?" O5-5 said, "We do not prevent destruction. We sequester the anomalous. And as long as we agree that the test was arrived through diligent scientific process available to anyone—" But O5-2 simply wasn't having it. He shot back, "Available to anyone? Listen to yourself, man!
Can you imagine a future where any 2-bit dictator chooses to unleash the fire of 1,000 suns wherever he wishes? Maybe the problem isn't with the equations. Maybe the whole of nuclear physics is anomalous itself.
05-1 once again brought his own level-headed perspective to the table. Enrico Fermi has already received a Nobel Prize for his work on transuranic elements and radioactivity. We can't just secure nuclear physics from the world. Radioactivity is everywhere, and we end up causing more contradictions when we try to send ourselves back to the Dark Ages. Try explaining chemistry without referring to covalent bonds. Try explaining biology. Nuclear physics is here to stay, and we had better get used to the consequences of this, no matter how terrifying this will be for the planet and for humanity. With a rattling sigh, 05-2 once again took a seat, murmuring, "May God have mercy on our souls." In the aftermath of this debate, the document on consensus reality was altered to reflect these new developments in nuclear physics, as frightening as they were. I think we can all form a consensus on the fact that one-off murder is a less depressing subject than mass murder, and it was a single murder that led to the O5 Council discussing the concept of worms that walk in 2014. 05-6 came to the table with, "For those unfamiliar with the topic, the worm that walks is a trope in which a character is actually a writhing hive mind of worms generally held together as a single mass. We're not here to discuss this trope. Instead, we are here to discuss the recent conspiracy that has arisen from it. The conspiracy is the idea that certain individuals are actually worms that walk, and not humans." When asked if this conspiracy had any merit to it, 05-6 replied, "No, individual conspiracy believers are divided themselves on who is a worm that walks and who isn't. And all evidence indicates that there aren't actual worms that walk in the general populace. It pretty clearly falls under irreproducible conspiracy theories. I personally believe there's nothing we need to do or change in SCP-001. Another member of the council wasn't so sure that these results were irreproducible, saying, "On December 11th, 2013, a believer in the conspiracy from Decatur, Alabama killed his neighbor, under the belief that the neighbor was a worm that walks. The killer then took a video of his deceased neighbor and uploaded it to YouTube, claiming it was proof of the conspiracy and that the corpse was dissolving into individual worms before his very eyes. He said that he was going to take a sample. The video was quickly blocked and removed, and everyone who has viewed the video agrees that the subject is unmoving and does not dissolve into worms. The killer turned himself into police while clutching a jar of Tubifex worms, and the neighbor sent to the Morgan County morgue. Autopsy confirmed that the decedent was missing a thumb post-mortem and killed by a gunshot to the chest, which, if he were a worm that walks, would be survivable." When questioned whether these were just the actions of a single insane man, the council member continued, "The one item of interest was that after the autopsy, the assistant coroner oversaw the return of the body to the next of kin. The assistant coroner was also a conspiracy believer, and despite not having any prior contact to the parties involved, screamed in disgust upon entering the examination room, grabbing a mop and complaining about all the worms everywhere. No one else noticed any signs of worm infestation." It was further discussed that D-classes who were shown the body didn't see it as anything other than a corpse. However, after being told about the worm that walks trope, several of them saw it as a writhing mass of worms. Some believe that this could be a mimetic side effect of actually encountering a living worm that walks, and updates were made to the document to reference the possible existence of perceptual monastic worm triggers. So now you know what the O5 Council is up to when not playing office golf or plotting each other's downfalls. They're having discussions about witchcraft, war crimes, and walking worms. You're probably feeling a pang of curiosity about the actual SCP-001 document, especially if you're an understandably vindictive, anomalous individual wondering why the Foundation is carting you off to paranormal Gitmo for the simple crime of existing. And if you look for the true document and you manage to survive the mimetic kill agents put in place to stop you, then what you'll actually find is even stranger. A letter to you from O5-5 explaining exactly what's happening to you. The letter reads, "Hello, I'm afraid you won't find SCP-001 here. It's stored in a far more unreachable location than this. I'm sure you were hoping you could get in, edit it in a couple of places here and there, and voila, you're no longer anomalous. You're free to go. The Foundation will harass you no longer. Of course, it can't be that easy. But I'm going to help you. You deserve this much. I'm going to tell you why. Why the Foundation targets you. Why we deem you something to contain, to persecute. After all, there are far worse evils in the world. We keep our record of nuclear weapons above as an example. There are numerous genocides throughout history. The death toll from just the flu alone is far greater than the potential damage for thousands of the people and objects we contain. And yet we dedicate ourselves to branding you anomalous, something not normal, something inherently wrong, something that cannot be allowed its peace. Why? I'm not going to patronize you and say there's nothing I can do. I'm only one voice on the council, and I can't change things on my own, that's true. But the decisions I make, and the way I let myself view your circumstance are a direct cause of people seeing fit to throw you into a box. Even if I can't change the document, I could remain one more advocate for your normalcy. After all, humanity has believed in ghosts and spirits for thousands of years. We all believe in the monster under our beds when we were children. These phenomena are very real, and very much a part of the way the world works. Why can't we just declare them normal? Why won't I free you from your torment? It's because we aren't only here to secure, contain, and protect the world. We're here to secure, contain, and protect you. The defining feature of the anomalous is that it cannot be explained through simple scientific testing. This makes you and your nature different, unique even. And that scarcity makes it valuable. But that doesn't mean that your value is something everyone can appreciate. Sometimes it can only be appreciated by those who would use it against you. The scarcity is also the tool by which a monster can exploit you. Others aren't familiar with your anomaly and won't respond to descriptions about it as real. This gives opportunity to nefarious individuals to exploit the lack of knowledge and use you as an eldritch pawn to their pleasure. They can isolate you, consume you, make your anomaly their lever to destroy, slake a sadistic thirst with your existence. I'm sure you've seen it happen. Someone is different. Their desires, needs, their reality forces them to be ostracized by the world at large. They're left alone, probably not friendless, but sidelined, starved for connection. That's when someone swoops in, promising greatness, but only offering that connection you crave through consumption of you, destruction of your world, perversion of your reality. You fight back, try to tell someone of your plight, but others respond, "Oh, that can't be happening, that's not real. You must be mistaken." You are alone in your anomaly and left to suffer. We can't let that happen. Yes, go ahead, point out that we're isolating you at least as well, slowly consuming you and your existence just as surely as some abuser might wish to burn you up. Call us monsters. It's okay. But keep in mind that even in our pursuit of you, our cover-up, our incarceration of you, we still want to make sure that you continue to exist, that you aren't removed entirely from this world. You have every right to exist. You have every right to be as different as you are. You, the monsters out there, the monsters in here, you are all just as real as we are. Just as real as the teeming, irrational, self-destructive humanity that remains ignorant to your plight. And the conclusion that we are all, in the end, the same stuff. I hope you can find comfort in it. Yes, you are a monster. But whether we are deemed anomalous or not, so is every last one of us. And that means you deserve your existence. We secure you. We contain you. We protect you. And even if you still don't get why I'm doing this, please understand that I still love you.
The man's bedroom hadn't been silent for over 100 years now. The carpet had been worn down. A thick layer of dust had gathered on every surface, and the same trapped air had stagnated for so long that it had become unbearable for anyone entering the room. But no one was allowed to enter the room. Nobody could open that door ever again, or it could mark the beginning of not just an apocalypse, but a breakdown in the nature of reality itself. Figures shuffled around the room, sometimes dozens, sometimes as few as 3, all rotting, but never dying. Researchers peered through the window in abject terror day after day as the laws of physics broke down before their very eyes. All of them except one, a lone scientist with a plan to get inside that room. A plan that the Foundation would shoot him dead for. A plan that he was seconds away from enacting as the improvised explosive device in his satchel clunked heavily against his thigh. In many ways, we are just as trapped as SCP-001, if not more so. We are trapped in our own three-dimensional world. Take a stick figure drawn on a piece of paper. That stick figure knows up and down, left and right, and that is their world. You draw a box around them, and they are trapped, unable to simply step forward out of the page and walk around it. For us, looking down at the stick figure, we might laugh at their foolishness. Trapped inside a child's drawing of a house, it begs the question, is there a creature looking down at us and laughing? We may be able to move up and down, left and right, forward and backward, outsmarting the simple stick figure. But in time, we are just as caged in, living our entire lives on this razor-thin piece of paper called the present. The future is always just out of reach, the past always repelling us. We have no choice but to exist in the now, slowly creeping through history without any agency of our own. Cursed to be born, live, and die in that order. You can never be a child again, never see your mother's face for the first time beaming down at you. You cannot skip ahead to your dying minutes, knowing what it is you will have to face up to in your life. Maybe the idea of facing up to things at all will fade with the freedom of exploring what once was and what will be, as if it were no more difficult than taking a step out of a 2D box. The bell rang, cutting Professor Davies off. He hadn't meant to go into such an existential tangent, especially for his first-year students. Most of them looked like they were in a daze, not really listening to anything he had been saying. Quantum mechanics sure was a complex topic to cover in just one semester at university. He'd spent his entire career trying to wrap his head around it, and still spend most of his days with the same bored and confused glaze over his eyes as the teenagers who made their way to the back of the hall. But one figure, standing just beyond the doorway peering down at him, caught the professor's eye. Little did he know how drastically his career was about to change in just a few minutes. A preeminent physicist at just 28 years old, Professor Davies had already achieved the status that many academics will not see within their lifetimes. Whenever anyone asked him about it, he always made the joke that he was cheating. He didn't believe in the concept of a linear lifetime in the first place. Still too young to be taken seriously by many of his peers, he had flown under the academic radar for much of his career so far. Perhaps it was as simple as that. Or perhaps certain undercover agents had a hand in suppressing news of his blossoming career in quantum research. His hands trembled as he approached the reinforced glass. He gripped the bag tightly, trying his best not to let his fear show. If any of them saw what he was about to do, if they even suspected something, he would have a dozen bullets flying through the back of his skull before he'd even have a chance to put his hands up. Shifting his weight from foot to foot, he waited for the airlock to be opened for him. A siren blared, red lights flashed, and the first glass door slid open. Stepping inside, he waited for the atmosphere in the chamber to adjust. Both doors were closed in front of and behind him. If they wanted to kill him, now would be the time. He closed his eyes and waited with bated breath, the bomb weighing heavily on his shoulder. But they would not kill him. He knew that now. What he was about to do was inevitable. It took several months for Professor Davies to be granted the full security clearance he needed. They kept referring to his project as a K-class anomaly, whatever that meant, in order to get him up to speed with the nature of what he was going to be working on. The Foundation assigned him to various other SCPs first. SCP-5027, 2821, 1887, any instance that had some link to quantum mechanics or complex theoretical physics. They wouldn't even tell him which SCP he was being trained up to work on until one morning when a team of agents was waiting for him at the door to his quarters. He wasn't allowed to bring a bag or any personal possessions, standard issue clothing, a toothbrush, and everything else he needed would all be provided for him. It was only then that they told him which SCP he was being assigned to. SCP-001. He was blindfolded for the entirety of the journey. Car, then plane, then another car. It was a full 10 hours before his blindfold was removed and his new project was revealed to him. Professor Davies found himself in Site-01, the place where all of this started. All the SCPs, all the research, the secrecy, the assassinations, the deaths of countless innocent people, and an equal number of guilty parties. It all started right here, Site-01. The site itself resembled a large sarcophagus, similar to the one found covering the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Where do you think the Soviets got the blueprints from? Everything in the room is arranged in a circle around the center. Research desks, maintenance equipment, raw materials including a stockpile of wooden planks and reinforced metal sheets, monitoring equipment, security cameras, and of course, some of the most advanced automatic weapon systems in the world, all pointed at a great glass box in the middle of the hangar. Measuring 30 meters in each direction, the glass was 50 centimeters thick. Even all those high-caliber weapons would have had a hard time creating a chip in that. But it wasn't the glass box itself that was so interesting. It was what was trapped inside of it. A house inside a perfectly round glass bowl, with no entrances or exits, complete with a front lawn, sidewalk, porch, and even a tree in the backyard. A regular American house, trapped in a box like some kind of science experiment. There was some kind of transparent airlock system at the entrance. On the other side was just a normal walk up the garden path to the edge of the second glass bubble enclosing the house. But on closer inspection, Professor Davies realized that this wasn't your typical American house at all. The street lamp wasn't electric. It was made of iron with little glass-paned windows, an oil lamp. In fact, the house did look odd to him. There was no electric doorbell, but instead an actual physical bell system. The whole house looked out of place, not just because it was in a box in the central hangar of a 42,000-ton sarcophagus, but because it was from another era entirely. You see, Site-01 was constructed around this house. The glass box and bubble, the sarcophagus, all of it was built around the already existing building. Beneath the foundations, 100 meters beneath the surface, is an immense metal plate that forms a perfect seal with the defenses up top. The only way in and out of Site-01 is through an immense reinforced door. But even all those defenses will prove utterly futile if anyone ever opens the thin wooden door to the bedroom on the top floor of the house. That is the home and the prison in which SCP-001 is trapped. It is the job of the Foundation to make sure that it remains trapped there indefinitely. What is SCP-001? As Professor Davies made his way through the airlock for the very first time and entered the site under the supervision of 4 of the highest-ranking SCP staff alive today, he laid eyes on the entity itself for the first time. Standing on a scissor lift parked outside the front of the house, just inches away from the glass bubble, he was lifted high enough to look through the window into what looked like a young boy's bedroom on the top floor. Layers of dust coated the surfaces, black and white photos sat in frames, antique children's toys sat all around the walls, but Davies didn't notice any of them. He was too busy watching the men walking in all directions. Unhurried, but with purpose, well over a dozen men walked in all directions across the carpeted floor. They were all identical, around 6 feet, with heavy rotting skin that seemed to hang off their limbs like it would a carcass left in the sun. Human cadavers milling about in a young boy's bedroom. Davies was so taken aback by their appearance and behavior that it took him a long time to notice something truly strange. The reason he was brought here in the first place. They were walking through the bed in the middle of the room. Not just over it or around it, but straight through it, as if it wasn't there. But wait, something else was wrong too. There weren't 12 of them in the room. It was closer to 20. Had he miscounted a moment ago? Then he saw it take place. One of the cadavers reached the edge of the room and paused, as if in thought. At that moment, it split. Not in half, but rather 2 versions of itself emerged from where one had been standing, both walking in different directions. A thrill of excitement ran through Professor Davies' body. The uncertainty principle. It was there in action in front of him. He was looking at Schrodinger's cat inside the box and seeing both its corpse and its living self. Where uncertainty exists, this entity was somehow embodying both possibilities in real time. He watched the 2 selves walk around the room, following different paths for several minutes, until eventually they converged again back into one being. He turned to the researcher accompanying him, lit up with excitement, and asked what they were doing here. The researcher's face was grim when he replied, "They're pacing, waiting." The airlock door hissed open. He felt the stale 1800s air hitting his face. perfectly maintained at 20 degrees. In front of him was the garden path leading up to his goal, that glass bubble. Gripping the satchel, he set off up the path slow enough not to attract any unwarranted attention. Over the next few days, Professor Davies learned everything that the Foundation had on SCP-001. It had been a human once, a radical physicist born in the late 19th century. Intent on kickstarting the next century with a nuclear renaissance, the young man had created a working model for stable nuclear fusion. The potential ramifications were enormous: free, clean electricity on a mass scale with no harmful byproducts. His research was almost complete when a covert private military group poisoned him with his own radioactive nuclear agent. The young man made it back to his house, where he died in his sleep that night. Powerful military personnel and prominent scientists who had been working alongside the young man knew immediately what had happened. Bursting into his home, they were about to walk through his bedroom door and save him, when they saw the shadow of 2 feet standing by the door, then another pair. The young scientist had died, but he also hadn't. Much like Schrodinger's cat, the man was suspended in a dual state of death and not death. This shocking discovery led the group of people present to form a rudimentary foundation, established to secure and contain their once friend within his room, never to be discovered by the wider world. Through close observation since this time, it has been established that SCP-001 exists independently of linear time, in a kind of superposition relative to the world around it. It is capable of occupying any space that will or has been empty at any point in time. Say you have 2 chairs in a room. One chair has always been there. The other was added to the room just 5 minutes before. The SCP is unable to walk through the chair that was always there since it has always existed. But the chair that was added can be passed through with no problem, because there was a point in time when that chair had not been there. But it also works in the future. If a third chair was present, which had always been there but was removed 5 minutes after the experiment, SCP-001 could pass through that chair also. The Foundation theorizes and hopes that the start of this clock that SCP-001 operates on was the point at which the young scientist died and did not die. That is why it is incapable of escaping its bedroom, and that is why it is of vital importance that the bedroom door remains closed forever. Ongoing maintenance work and preservation techniques are being employed to keep the house in as stable a state as possible. Should anything happen to damage the integrity of the structure, the quantum chaos contained in that space could lead to a total breakdown of the laws of physics, destroying not just the world but the fundamentals of mathematics as we know them. The bomb bumped against Professor Davies' thigh as he walked up to the house, an old man whose life had been devoted to denying the world its future. A reality where what is and what could be are just as real as one another. A world where the pain of living in the now fades, when you can travel to any moment in your life and relive its joy, when you aren't trapped by the aging process. Infinite renewable energy to solve the world's problems, a chance to see your deceased loved ones again, a way to look at the universe through the eyes of God. The head of 001 Containment, he had spent his entire career overriding all of the safeguards, tweaking containment rules just enough each year, all so he could walk across this grass with a satchel on his shoulder and an explosive more important than the atomic bomb at his hip. He approached the glass of the inner sphere. If he had done the math right, this should do just enough damage to create a hole in the containment structure. The pressure change wouldn't be too great inside, but it should be just enough to blow, say, a bedroom door wide open.
From far away in orbit around the Earth, the nuclear holocaust almost looked beautiful. Bright white pinpricks dotting the planet's surface glinted up at the escaping jet. For generations, much of humanity had lived in fear that the destruction of the world would come from countries launching nuclear weapons at each other. No one expected it to come when they started launching them against themselves. The invasion of the weasels had been as savage as it was swift. Much of the human population had been wiped out before any military forces had mobilized in any significant fashion. No one was sure if the launching of the nuclear weapons was intentional or accidental, but as soon as one country fired, the others quickly followed suit. Earth's rich and powerful, the 1% of the 1%, stared in silence as their home was ripped apart. The high-altitude jet carrying them steadily descended back down to Earth in the direction of the Antarctic.
500 people in total, chosen as the successors of the human race, shuffled off the jet and through the frozen outpost. An alarm blared, wrenching all of them out of their shell-shocked silence. A second later, the station shook violently. They had been found. There was no time left. They needed to leave right now. The swarm of people stampeded through the outpost, throwing one another out of the way in a desperate attempt to save their own lives, to save the lives of the human race. In front of them, the portal stood open. The green pastures, beautiful trees, it all felt so offensive as the earth behind them was engulfed in war. All those countless beautiful spaces were torn apart and left to waste. But they couldn't think about it now. They had to make it through. The handful of the survivors of the human race ran through the open portal just as an explosion ripped apart the remaining outpost. SCP-001-Yellow refers to a base of operation used for a Foundation continuance protocol, specifically Project Yellow. In the event of a world-destroying catastrophe where humanity appears irrevocably doomed, there is one bastion of hope. Referred to as the Garden of Eden by some of the crew, Yellow contains a large circular central space, complete with lush green grass and an orchard measuring 500 by 500 meters. This open space constitutes the main living area of Project Yellow. Surrounding this space are tall, sheer cliffs, too vertical to be climbed unaided. Built into these cliffs are 500 sleeper chambers in which those evacuated from planet Earth will be suspended in cryosleep until a time when Earth is fit to be repopulated or a new home has been discovered. How can the Foundation guarantee that this safe haven avoids the calamities that could befall planet Earth? By housing Project Yellow in a separate dimension, a pocket dimension to be specific. Following the successes of Project Bifrost, in which SCP-2591-Omega's ability to access fictional pocket dimensions was utilized, the Foundation was able to establish a relatively stable and reliable dimension for Yellow to occupy. The only way to access the base of operations was via a dimensional rift or portal housed deep in the Antarctic. Now, of course, if Yellow's population consisted of 500 people in cryosleep, cut off from planet Earth, there would be no one capable of conducting maintenance or assessing the possibility of returning to planet Earth. Therefore, carved into the cliffs alongside the sleeper cells were living quarters for the crew of 60 specialists. It was this workforce who sat down together on the night of the apocalypse and raised a toast in a more bittersweet celebration. All 500 of the evacuees had managed to make it safely through the portal before its collapse. Each of them had been welcomed to Project Yellow and shown to their individual sleeper pods before being entered into cryosleep for the foreseeable future. But as each of the crew members raised their glasses into the air, Dr. Katrina Keyes couldn't help but feel uneasy about the proceedings. Working in this job, you'd have to have a dark sense of humor and an ability to move past things that could destroy the mental well-being of your average person. Even then, she struggled to come to terms with the near destruction of the human race. For her and the rest of the crew, life would look nothing like it did before they arrived here. It was vital for the integrity of the project that the crew remained consistent and effective in their work indefinitely. As a result, Yellow had been set up with perpetuity in mind. Every 55 years, she and all of her crewmates would pass on their knowledge, memories, and entire sense of being into a genetic clone. They would then die, allowing their clone to take over the responsibility of those tasks. In another 55 years, this would repeat again and again and again. All this time, it is the crew's responsibility to monitor the status of Earth through the use of 100 drones. Once the Earth is deemed safe, all 500 sleepers may be awoken and briefed on the current situation. If all 500 unanimously vote that returning to Earth is safe, they will do so. Otherwise, they will return to cryosleep, and the process will continue. It was little wonder that Dr. Keyes was unable to raise a glass with her colleagues at the prospect of being stuck here, cloned indefinitely for generations. She sat in silence as they raised their glasses and then emptied them. A couple of them coughed and sputtered. Their drinks must have gone down the wrong way, but then more coughs filled the room, along with choking sounds. Much to Dr. Keyes' horror, within less than a minute, she found herself alone, surrounded by the 59 corpses of her crewmates. In order for Project Yellow to be viable indefinitely, it was paramount that they find a solution for natural wear and tear. Through generation after generation of usage, essential items such as tools, computer systems, and even articles of clothing would eventually wear away and fall into disrepair. As such, Project Yellow was set up as a selective entropy zone in which inorganic matter would not degrade over time. Achieving such a zone was naturally an incredibly difficult undertaking. Project Bifrost underwent countless iterations as the team strived to create a stable and balanced fictional pocket dimension capable of sustaining human life long-term. Over the next few days after the death of her crewmates, Dr. Katrina Keyes read through as much as she could about Project Bifrost. In the notes, she found records of dimensions where lava rained from the sky and the grass was radioactive. Yellow had been the first dimension without any glaringly obvious hazards for human life. But naturally, their work had quirks. One key quirk was that the chemical composition of cyanide and their drinks had been switched with one another. The only crew member not to raise a toast had been the only crew member not to drink a glass full of poison. Months went by, leaving Dr. Keyes alone to assess her situation. The drones, strategically positioned all around Earth to monitor its safety levels, had been systematically destroyed by the weasels. Only one feed remained, a security camera on the other side of the portal, and the Antarctic outpost. There was virtually no intel to go off of. No way of knowing what the status of planet Earth was aside from the fact that this one burnt-out shell of a room still existed. Some days, Keyes would stare at the screen for hours, forgetting to go to bed. On others, she would walk through the orchard, trying her best to pretend that nothing outside of this 500 by 500 meter space existed. In a way, it didn't. The Orchard of Yellow did not consist of your usual apple trees. Instead, suspended from branches were essential supplies that the crew would need while manning and maintaining this base of operations. Some trees grew antibiotic drugs, others long strands of linen capable of being fashioned into clothing. Dr. Keyes' favorite tree was the one that grew rolls of toilet paper and tubes of toothpaste. It almost reminded her of a Halloween prank. Dr. Keyes' mental state steadily deteriorated as year after year she walked through the same orchard alone. Never before in history had one human being had so much control over the fate of the human race. At any moment, Dr. Keyes could have inputted a few simple commands into the computers and killed off all 500 of the remaining human beings in existence. The decision not to hold on to hope that one day humanity will be able to start again, was the only thing that kept her going day after lonely day. Only that and the other thing, the prospect of having to prepare for her clone to take over. While constructing the cloning pods, the crew had made a number of small errors. The most glaring of which was that the fact that while all of the genetic material would be transferred from one person to their clone offspring, the mind would not. In other words, the clone that would replace her in this facility in 55 years' time would be starting out from scratch as a regular newborn baby. No memories, no advanced cognition. So Dr. Keyes went about preparing for the next of kin. She herself would die in the cloning process, meaning that she would need to come up with a way of raising a child to be capable of running the whole facility from beyond the grave. Item 1 on her to-do list: create a god that her offspring would forever be in service to. With a sardonic smile, Dr. Keyes came up with an appropriately amusing name: Tracy the Sparkling. 70 years later, Yellow was still operated by just a single crewmate. Only now, this crewmate was a 15-year-old girl. Nicknaming herself KK2, she went about all of her daily tasks with infectious excitement. The idea that she alone was responsible for the fate of the human race could not make her happier, and she was determined not to screw it up, both for her sake and to not anger her god, Tracy the Sparkling, whom she worshipped every evening before bed. Whenever a problem would come up, she would go and visit KK1, where she knew she would be met with sound advice. Pushing open the door to the crew quarters, KK2 would find the corpse lying on the floor in its usual place, as a number of pre-recorded messages would bark at her. Lesson NE957: why taking a bath is important, even if no one but you will ever know how you smell. All she had to do was not anger the disciplinary drones with their harsh tasers, and do her duty until it was time for KK3 to take over. At that point, she would be welcomed into the afterlife with all of the other KKs, a wonderful and magical place known simply as Burger King. That was until KK2 got far enough through the audio recordings of her predecessor to discover that Tracy the Sparkling was entirely made up, and her life meant nothing. It was just a stepping stone for another clone, for another clone, for another clone, until eventually the Earth would be okay. By KK-52, the remaining camera on Earth, the one housed in the Antarctic outpost, went offline. While inorganic material within Yellow compound would not undergo aging, the same could not be said of the circuitry left on Earth. Generation after generation of KK lived and died, each one growing more spiteful towards the one that came before them. Each one did their best to undermine the one that would come after them. The lore around Tracy the Sparkling expanded further and further with each generation. There would be waves of highly religious KKs, followed by waves of devoutly atheistic ones, as each sought to rebel against their pseudo-parents. KK-89 was the first to expand the religious movement to include the teaspoons. Very methodically, she went through each teaspoon in the canteen and named it after a different animal from Earth. Before long, subsequent KKs established a shrine to the teaspoons. The living space of Project Yellow steadily descended into madness, with writings all over the walls, bizarre decorations, and rituals long forgotten, until a new KK came along and invented something to take their place. KK-216 lived her entire life in silence, never once recording an audio log or even talking to herself. She lived and died walking through the garden in silence, wrapped up in linens. KK-310 did the opposite. She fancied herself a music composer and scrawled the lyrics to haunting symphonies about nuclear apocalypse, eternal isolation, and the prospect of the angel of death coming to rescue her across all of the walls. No matter how hard any of the KKs tried, however, none of them were able to hack into the cloning machine. Generation after generation of Dr. Keys lived and died, desperate to know what a friend was, to have someone else to talk to. But despite all of their best efforts, they were unable to tamper with the cloning machine to get it to spit out another person. For several hundred years, the KKs gave up entirely. That was until KK-507 came along. Day after day, she sat at the cloning machine, desperately typing away at it, trying her best to figure out how the computer coding worked. The downside of living in a pocket universe was that none of the computer circuitry behaved the way it would on Earth. She was certain that she'd made progress. Any generation now, they were going to have a breakthrough and be able to make a friend, when all of a sudden, a totally alien noise filled the containment space, the sound that hadn't been heard for millennia. Alert! Door controls overridden. Opening. KK-507 turned around in horror to see that the portal, the entrance to their world from Earth, had been opened. The figure of a man. No, not a man. A robot, painted to almost look like a crash test dummy, stepped out into the orchard. Hello. The goddess has informed us that this is the last bastion of the true human race. Is that correct? KK-507 opened her mouth and screamed.
Say, kids, would you like to hear a story? 'Cause we've got a really good one for you. Seriously, you're going to love it. It's a classic rags to riches tale about one man's rise from humble beginnings to become one of history's greatest and most visionary toy makers. Or maybe it isn't. Maybe it's about a company that literally came from nothing, whose origins are still shrouded in mystery. Maybe it's about a woman breaking the glass ceiling to take over the toy company left to her by her eccentric father. Maybe it's about all of these things. But the one thing we can tell you about the story of Dr. Wondertainment is that every word of it is true. Or at least as far as anything is true in the weird, wonderful world of the SCP Foundation. As long as you believe, we'll all have a wonderful time. As long as you believe, nothing can hurt you. Not in the fabulous world of Dr. Wondertainment. Dr. Wondertainment is the name given to SCP-001, who, due to his relatively benign nature, has been classified as safe by the Foundation. Rather than focusing on containing Wondertainment himself, the SCP Foundation has centered its efforts on containing the products that he creates. He is a Class 1 reality warper, capable of constructing otherwise normal objects and imbuing them with anomalous properties. He's become infamous for using this ability to create bizarre, magical, and potentially dangerous toys and games that are distributed by as yet unknown means. Many of Wondertainment's toys are in the Foundation's possession, such as SCP-445, origami paper that takes on properties of whatever it's folded to look like, and SCP-3147, lollipops that allow people to switch voices with each other. Dr. Wondertainment was born into a family of humble means.
His mother was a seamstress and his father was an accountant. Unsatisfied with his mundane life, Wondertainment's only joy growing up was in the stories that his father would tell him about an ancestor of his who was once a famous toymaker. Inspired by these stories, Wondertainment developed an interest in crafting toys, and as an adult set out to learn the secrets he would need to create toys unlike anything the world had ever seen. He spent his life following rumors of magical artifacts and enchanted trinkets until his search brought him to a mysterious factory. If you've seen our previous videos on SCP-001 proposals, you can probably guess that this factory was the factory, the mysterious place where new SCPs are supposedly created. Wondertainment barely escaped the massacre and the Foundation takeover of the factory with his life, but he was able to find a variety of notes that he took with him. These notes contained clues that led him to the workshop of his famous Toymaker ancestor, and from there, he reclaimed his birthright. That was the day that he truly became Dr. Wondertainment. It's a fun story, isn't it? Very straightforward, but perhaps it is a little underwhelming for an SCP-001 proposal. After all, SCP-001 is the collective designation given to some of the most important anomalies of all time, including many that could have potentially been involved in the Foundation's very founding. Let's start again. Reginald Filbert Lionel Archibald Westinghouse Wondertainment III is the name given to SCP-001, who, due to his highly unpredictable nature, has been classed as Euclid by the Foundation, and he is to be detained as soon as his location can be ascertained. Until he can be captured, the SCP Foundation has focused its efforts on containing the products that he creates. He is a Class 2 reality warper, capable of constructing otherwise normal objects and imbuing them with anomalous properties. He's become infamous for using this ability to create bizarre, magical, and potentially dangerous toys, games, candy, soft drinks, and other products aimed at children and young teens. These products are distributed by as yet unknown means. Many of Wondertainment's creations are in Foundation possession, such as the often imitated but never matched Little Mister's Collection, which are a group of living collectibles with unique anomalous properties. Due to Wondertainment's reality warping abilities, it is impossible to pin down concrete information about his history. What we can tell you for sure is that he's immortal and ageless and comes from a long line of Wondertainment stretching all the way back to the Cretaceous period, where they made all sorts of toys for the good little dinosaur children. It's also widely known that he is in fact not a real person, but merely the manifestation of the dreams of every child on Earth, brought forth solely by the power of imagination. No confirmed sightings of Dr. Wondertainment have ever occurred, but witnesses have described him as dashing, very handsome for his age, and a lovely chap capable of creating whimsy and wonder with the snap of his fingers. He's a tall man about the height of a piece of string, and he's immediately recognizable by his walking stick and W-shaped mustache. It's also been reported that he has scarring around the circumference of both wrists, almost as if his hands have been removed and reattached at some point. However, the truth of the matter is that… No, we're telling it all wrong again. This doesn't do anything to capture the scope of the Wondertainment story. It needs to feel bigger, more comprehensive. Let's try it again. Dr. Wondertainment is a trademark of the Wondertainment Toy Company, the name given to SCP-001. A corporation that, due to its consistent output of anomalous items, is classed by the Foundation as Keter. Until this company can be permanently shut down, the SCP Foundation has focused its efforts on containing the products that it creates. The collective power of the company's constituent employees and the technology they make use are equivalent to that of a Class 3 reality warper. The Wondertainment Company produces and sells a range of products, ranging from the seemingly normal to the downright weird, all imbued with anomalous properties. The company has become infamous for their constant output of bizarre, magical, and potentially dangerous toys, games, candy, soft drinks, and other products aimed at children, teens, and young-at-heart adults. These products are made and distributed from Wonderworld, trademark, a location that is yet unknown to the Foundation but offers factory tours every hour from Tuesday to Friday. Many of Wondertainment's creations are in Foundation possession, such as Wondertainment's famous dragon snails, the real fire-breathing pet you can keep in your pocket. Not much is known about the inner workings of the Wondertainment Company. The SCP Foundation has no information currently on the company's leadership structure, location, history, or corporate policies. Various former and current employees have been interviewed regarding their experiences working for Wondertainment, but they never seem to be able to remember very much of use. Those interviewed variously described the Wondertainment Company as a regular office building, an immense toy factory, an amusement park, but all agree it's the best place they ever worked. In fact, you should apply for a job there. They have a few openings in their legal department. Or so I've heard. Oh, silly me, it seems we've gotten off topic. You're here to hear about the SCP-001 proposal. Posting a job ad wasn't what I meant to do when I hacked into… well, don't worry about that. Forget I said a thing. Now let's try this again. But this time, we'll add a twist. Isabel Helga Anastasia Parvati Wondertainment V is the name given to SCP-001, who, due to her ability to spread sunshine and whimsy wherever she goes, has been classed as Thaumiel by the Foundation. And due to her immensely unpredictable nature, the SCP Foundation has resolved to just leave her be. Because she can't be captured, the SCP Foundation has focused its efforts on containing the products that she creates. She is a Class 4 reality warper, capable of constructing wonderful, fantastic objects and imbuing them with anomalous properties. She's famous and widely beloved for using this ability to create bizarre, magical, and not even a little bit dangerous toys, games, candy, soft drinks, and other products aimed at everyone from ages 9 to 99. These products are distributed by as yet unknown means. Many of Wondertainment's creations are in Foundation possession, such as SCP-3551, the awesome inflatable alien invaders, and SCP-2514, a lovely horse who can sing Happy Birthday. How grand. Wondertainment inherited the Wondertainment name from her father, who either passed away or never existed at all. The circumstances of his death and perhaps non-existence were very messy, involving a mass murderer, the leader of a shadowy international extra-governmental paramilitary organization, at least one deity, and 4 bent paperclips. She owns 6 corgis, and all of them are named Jeremy. In her free time, she likes to… No, this is all still wrong. All right, enough is enough. You want to know who Dr. Wondertainment really is? Well, you asked for it. Dr. Wondertainment is the name given to SCP-001, who due to his deity-level power has been classed as Apollyon by the Foundation. There is no possible way to contain him. He is a Class 5 reality warper, capable of breaking down and reconstructing the very laws of reality. Did you really think that those little trinkets were the full extent of his creations? Did you truly think of him as such a small, petty creature? Dr. Wondertainment is no mere toysmith. No, he is a god. Want examples of his creations? Just look around you. Everything from the most innocent safe class to the most harrowing Keter class, it's all thanks to him. He is behind everything. Marshall Carter and Dark, the Sarkists, the Church of the Broken God, even the Scarlet King himself. All that time, all that effort, all it came down to was one entity. One singular living personification of chaos. One day the SCP Foundation will finally give up trying to find out how he distributes his products. When they will finally see how small and worthless their attempts to restore order really are. And they will be driven before his power! They will crumble and decay into nothingness! You will bow before Dr. Wondertainment! Had you going for a second there, didn't we? You should have seen the looks on your faces. But let's start again, one more time. We're being serious this time. Mask off, here's the true story of Dr. Wondertainment. Dr. Wondertainment is the name given to SCP-001, who due to his relatively benign nature has been classed as neutralized by the Foundation.
Rather than focusing on containing Wondertainment himself, the SCP Foundation has focused its efforts on containing the products that he creates. He is a reality warper whose limits have yet to be documented, capable of constructing otherwise normal objects and imbuing them with anomalous properties. He's become infamous for using this ability to create bizarre, magical, and potentially dangerous toys and games that are distributed by as yet unknown means. Due to his secretive nature, almost nothing is known of Dr. Wondertainment's true origins, and the waters have been muddied extensively by the side effects of his reality warping ability. In fact, it's entirely possible that Dr. Wondertainment himself doesn't know who he is anymore. It's possible that all the proposed origins and descriptions of Dr. Wondertainment are true in their own way, but it is equally possible that none of them are. All that's known for sure is that Dr. Wondertainment, be they male or female, corporation, or single individual, is a constant thorn in the SCP Foundation's side. No matter who they really are, they're not going away soon, and only time will tell who they'll be tomorrow, or what further horrors they and their company will create. And that's where our story will have to come to an end.
The SCP Foundation is no stranger to pure evil. Whether it's a reptile that wants to end all life, a sadistic old man with his own torture dimension, or the personification of death itself lurking beyond a limestone cavern. But what if there was something even worse out there? The embodiment of chaos and cruelty, existing across multiple realities and dimensions. And what if it was coming for us? This is the Scarlet King, believed by many to be the ultimate evil behind much of the trouble the Foundation has faced, and some even speculate that fighting him was the reason the Foundation was created in the first place. But what exactly is the Scarlet King? He's known by many names, almost always including some allusion to the color red, and then a reference to royalty or power. Harak, Kaharak, the Red Shah, the Crimson Khan, PTE 616 Mendez Ex Machina, the Laha Raja, and, of course, SCP-001, to name a few. And like many of the Foundation's mysterious enemies, stories about his true nature and origins abound and are often contradictory. According to the official SCP-001 files of Tufto's proposal, symbology of the Scarlet King has existed in multiple cultures throughout history, with the king often depicted the same way, as a huge red demonic figure, often wearing a gold crown or other headdress indicating royalty. He shows up looking similarly within different cultures' mythologies, despite existing at different points in history or them not having the means to communicate with one another. A number of entities that the SCP Foundation is familiar with are believed to be somehow connected to the Scarlet King, including SCP-2317, a wooden door leading to the realm of a being known as the Devourer, who's expected to escape and cause an apocalyptic event in the next 30 years. But really, there's no way of knowing just how many SCPs are directly connected to the Scarlet King. Strangely, the Foundation's official file on the Scarlet King once designated his containment class as Keter, but that has since been downgraded to Safe. According to the file, any attempt to change this designation is likely to lead to horrifying results. It is widely known that the Scarlet King still has considerable influence over a number of groups, individuals, and anomalies in our universe. And if ever he made his way into our universe, it would likely lead to the irreversible damage of reality itself. So then why Safe? And why are the O5 Council so adamant that it remain that way? Getting to the bottom of this mystery is exactly why we're here today. But to fully grasp the true nature of the Scarlet King, we must first understand the man whose life and fate have always been tied to it, Dr. Robert Montauk. If that name feels oddly familiar to you, it's because of its association with one of the Scarlet King's most recent attempts to enter our reality, SCP-231. This SCP, often referred to as the Brides of the Scarlet King, was formed of 7 women. 7, by the way, being an extremely significant number for the king, all kidnapped by the most recent in a long line of the King's devoted cults known as the Children of the Scarlet King. Each of these 7 unfortunate women were impregnated with anomalous horrors, such as the infamous SCP-682, and every time one of these horrors were birthed, a catastrophe occurred and the mother died. At the time, Dr. Montauk was a prominent researcher studying this anomaly, and as 6 catastrophes had already occurred, pressure was mounting to figure out a way to prevent the final birth. But as he was working on the issue, Dr. Montauk was struck with a personal tragedy, the mysterious disappearance of his 14-year-old brother Jacob. In his fear and anger, Montauk believed that this must have something to do with the Scarlet King and his disciples. Wanting revenge, Montauk proposed an idea so horrifying that the details were never made public. A procedure known as 110 Montauk, to be performed on the final bride at regular intervals. However, this wasn't the end of Dr. Montauk's fraught relationship with the Scarlet King. It was just the beginning. To give you some perspective on just how dangerous the Scarlet King is, the SCP Foundation and the Global Occult Coalition decided to put aside their differences and form a joint effort to stamp out the children of the Scarlet King. They were successful in this mission, and even managed to capture the children's leader, a mysterious man named Depeche Spivak. Dr. Montauk, who became the lead researcher on 231 and 2317, was naturally the first choice for interviewing Depeche about the true nature of the children and of the Scarlet King. Dr. Montauk could never be the impartial interviewer that the SCP Foundation wanted, though. The suspicion that the Scarlet King or the children had something to do with the loss of his younger brother still lingered just beneath the surface. Like a lot of cult leaders, Depeche was extremely cryptic in his answers to Dr. Montauk's questioning. He'd already heard of the doctor from the reputation of the horrifying Montauk procedure, and was surprised to see him so calm and courteous in person. A few key facts about the king and his cult were revealed in the first few rounds of questioning. The children had once worked with the Serpent's Hand before being excommunicated for their allegiance to the king, and they had stolen sacred texts from the mystical Wanderer's Library to assist in their summoning rituals. Depeche also revealed that the Scarlet King is bound by 3 laws: the law of blood, the law of concrete, and the law of howling. Dr. Montauk, confused and frustrated by Depeche's secrecy, had to learn more. He found an old memoir from a former member of the Children of the Scarlet King, Jack Hirsch, who had the ability to invade the minds of people from the past and experience what they experienced. He recounted a battle between the Scarlet King and his followers, and a group of time-traveling Turkmen warriors from SCP-3838. Hurst saw both sides of the battle. From the perspective of the Children of the Scarlet King, their lord ruled over them from an immense fortress embedded in a volcano. From the perspective of the Turkmen, the children were starved and beaten peasants, commanded by the king's voice in the roaring howl of the wind. Montauk also found extensive records of summoning rituals performed by various Scarlet King-aligned cults. Interestingly, some of them incorporated the use of carved SCP Foundation symbols. What could this mean? Montauk returned again to Depeche, who finally gave him the truth about the law of blood. This is the law of the Scarlet King. It's defined by poverty, violence, starvation, hate, and most of all, fear. Like the serfs in the Middle Ages, persecuted by and subjected to violence from the nobles. To the Children of the Scarlet King, this sense of holy pain and awe is the only way to live. The alternative is the law of concrete, which means the modern age defined by empty safety and false comfort. Buildings, easy to access food, healthcare, knowledge, technology. This is everything that the Scarlet King despises. But the mystery only deepened as Montauk found files from a former Foundation operative by the name of Agent de Beauvoir. Montauk learned that the Scarlet King didn't seem to appear until after the Foundation was created. And in fact, it seemed that the greater interest the Foundation took in the Scarlet King, the more powerful he became. How could this be? Things were also getting stranger on a personal level for Dr. Montauk. Depeche repeatedly pressed him about his brother's disappearance and the Montauk procedure during the interviews. Little by little, it was beginning to take its toll. The questions still plagued him. What was the law of howling? Who or what really is the Scarlet King? How did he come to be? Montauk's search was causing him to act more like the children of the Scarlet King, ranting about the horrors of the modern world, how all of us are living a lie, how the only honest way to live is suffering under the dominion of the Scarlet King. This philosophy is summed up in the words of one cultist named Ariadne Cartwright, who said, "We must learn what it is to die, to be enslaved, truly, brutally enslaved, with no compassion or compunction from our masters. We must learn what it is to be taken towards a single purpose, to know and truly understand our lack of agency. We must be beholden to the words of gods and darkness, the tempest-tossed refuse of a race of fools. We must kill modernity, postmodernity, with all its analysis and sneering observation. There is only one rule, the rule of chaos, for humanity, for life, for the Scarlet King." Basically, anytime humanity tries to exert control over the world, the Scarlet King gets stronger. Every time they try to understand or organize or categorize their world, the Scarlet King gets stronger. As colonial and imperial powers conquered and invaded lands like India, Africa, and South America, and subjugated their beliefs under Western ideas, the Scarlet King grew stronger. Montauk was beginning to truly understand the power of his enemy here, and even worse, he was starting to understand his part in it. Montauk, slowly being driven mad by the knowledge he was gaining, realized that the Scarlet King's greatest enemy, the SCP Foundation, was also its greatest asset. Every time they tried to understand the monster, to give him some kind of comprehensible form, they only made him more powerful. Just in time with Montauk's new revelation, a red crack appeared in the wall of Depeche Spivak's containment cell, a portal to the realm of the Scarlet King. Foundation staff found they were unable to enter the cell, and Depeche demanded a final interview with Montauk. With no other options, the Foundation relented. In their very last conversation, Depeche congratulated Montauk for finally understanding what he was dealing with. The Scarlet King, Depeche told him, is an idea, a concept. He is a being given power through the conflict between the old and the new. This is the law of the howling. The Scarlet King's endless rage at the direction the world and humanity has taken. The king, according to Depeche, hated the Foundation's belief that science and rationality was the true path to progress. The king saw this as little more than petty arrogance. The reason Montauk's procedure on the final bride of the Scarlet King was so effective was because it wasn't born out of science. It was born out of hate, pain, the desire for revenge, and in the Scarlet King's realm, that would be all there is. Unless our world, and especially the Foundation, changed its course, the Scarlet King's rise to absolute power would be inevitable. Montauk, his mind practically gone, asked one last question. Did the children or the Scarlet King take his brother, Jacob? When Depeche told him the answer, no. And in response, Montauk shot him dead, finally bringing an end to the children of the Scarlet King. In light of his new revelations, Montauk begged the O5 Council to change their ways in order to avoid letting the Scarlet King break into our reality. They refused, saying Montauk's ideas were too radical. But they knew they couldn't just ignore the threat posed by the Scarlet King. They would have to take some steps. And so the O5 Council of the SCP Foundation, the most powerful and secretive group in the entire world, in order to prevent the most dangerous threat that humanity has ever known from breaking into our reality and enslaving all the people of the world, finally did something. They changed the classification of the Scarlet King from Keter to safe, and made its description on the official Foundation files deliberately vague. The O5 Council thinks this will be enough to stop the Scarlet King's power from continuing to grow, but Montauk knew it wasn't enough. He had seen the truth, and he couldn't unsee it. While the Foundation was going on as normal, Montauk grew to despise them. He knew the Scarlet King was coming. He knew that he couldn't be stopped, and that our whole reality was little more than sitting ducks. Dr. Robert Montauk is no longer a researcher for the SCP Foundation. No, Dr. Robert Montauk chose a different path. He's now a child of the Scarlet King, a devotee of madness, hate, and chaos. You can't beat the Scarlet King after all, and as the old adage goes, if you can't beat him, join him.
SCP-001 is an O5's tale. It makes sense, doesn't it? After all, regardless of the exact nature of an SCP-001 proposal, there are always certain things that remain the same. See if you can recall them all. Well, for starters, SCP-001s are all about vital moments, perhaps like the prototype, or the Foundation, or the sheaf of papers, or the Gate Guardian. They're about the very origin of the SCP Foundation itself. Perhaps like the Ouroboros cycle, or When Day Breaks, or The World Gone Beautiful. They're about apocalyptic-style destruction, or perhaps the rebirth. Perhaps like Consensus Reality or the Database. They are rules or realizations that changed everything. Maybe like the Scarlet King, or the Black Moon, or a simple Toymaker. They're about the sparking of great rivalries that truly define the backbone of the Foundation's activities. Another vital element of SCP-001 is always secrecy and classification. They are the most clandestine anomalies out there, generally hidden away below layer after layer of encryption and security. Even the database for SCP-001 entries is guarded by a memetic kill agent that'll leave you stone dead on the ground if you're below that magical level 5 clearance when you attempt to access it. No information is more carefully and forcefully guarded than this. And of course, another vital element of the SCP-001 entry is deception and trickery. It's inherent to the designation. No other number has multiple, entirely distinct anomalies, many of which either have no correlation with one another, or even actively contradict each other. If you ask some people, they'll tell you that there are multiple 001s because each is of equal importance in etching the rich portrait of the Foundation's past, present, and future. Some would tell you something very different. There's only one SCP-001. It's a shell game. The rest are all fakes to stop people from taking any single entry too seriously, and thus forever avoiding the truth. Some still would tell you that there is no SCP-001. It's all just a complex web of lies meant to keep the Foundation's enemies and allies in a state of pliable ignorance. If an intimate knowledge of the SCP Foundation's past and inner workings, a commitment to secrecy at all costs, and a love of deception as a tool for control all sound familiar, it's because they're the favorite toolkit of a certain group we're all familiar with. The O5 Council, the very top brass of the SCP Foundation. It only makes sense that if anyone knew the truth about the fractured and strange SCP-001, it would be them. The more observant among you may have noticed a certain omission from many popular SCP-001 entries we've name-dropped in this video so far. And it is no accident that this particular SCP-001 entry is the only one straight from the mouth of O5-1, the founder of the Council himself. It is the Factory. It is a strange and sordid tale of violence, horror, and dark bargains made with truly unknowable forces. It's a tale that tells us about the initial creation and growth of the Foundation, the event that nearly destroyed it, and an indication as to the dark future possibly in store. It's a little bit of everything you can expect from a good 001 proposal. And surely, if this is the SCP-001 entry that the head of the Council swears by, then it must be the definitive entry into the 001 canon, right? Well, not quite. Because as you're about to find out, not even the O5 Council itself can really reach a consensus on the true nature of the fascinating and much feared Factory. But perhaps, through hearing every side of this particularly dark story, we can find the kernels of truth hidden somewhere in the middle of it all. But of course, be warned, as with all things when it comes to the O5 Council, it's going to get extremely weird. But before we move on to what the rest of the O5 Council have to say about the Factory, it would be prudent to refresh our memory on O5-1's version of the story. The version that has been considered to be absolute. before we pour into the equally strange stories of the other council members. It began with a wealthy industrialist and thoroughly evil man named James Anderson all the way back in 1835, when the United States was still new and finding its feet. Anderson was an engine of unchecked ambition, malice, and most of all, truly boundless greed. He wanted everything and more. And being a true businessman down to the core, he was willing to make whatever deal he needed to make in order to see himself become an even wealthier man. That's why, like a lot of bored rich people in his day, he began dabbling in the dark arts for fun and profit, until eventually he made contact with a benefactor on the other side. Under these instructions, James Anderson built the factory, a truly magnificent and terrible feat of architecture and engineering for the time. A multi-level town-sized complex that could produce everything from food to weapons to toys to textiles to precious metals, and so much more. Workers could find room and board at this grand factory and pay for it with their labor. For the would-be workers of an unsteady early America, Anderson seemed like a saint. People flocked from all over the country to live and work in the factory. But once they were locked behind the factory's doors, they realized that James Anderson was no saint. He was as bad or worse than any devil he served. The inside of the factory was a torturous nightmare, where people were regularly worked to death and then ground into meat that was sold off all across the country. Anderson kept a brutal guard force to beat down anyone resisting or not working hard enough. Those who weren't worked to death or executed by the guards for some petty infraction could potentially have an even worse fate in store for them, being dragged off and subjected to occult experiments by Anderson. These people wouldn't be killed, but they would live as humans no more. Anderson was able to keep the factory and its nightmarish activities running and under wraps for decades, all the way into the Civil War. It was only when a beaten, bloody, starved, and traumatized worker managed to escape and alert President Ulysses S. Grant of the mistreatment going on inside that something was done about it. This is where 05-1 and a progenitor of the SCP Foundation would get involved. There was a small but elite group of Union soldiers commissioned by President Grant to work behind the Confederate lines, specializing in tackling the strange and supernatural down south. This group, of course, was led by 05-1. Considering some of the reports of anomalous supernatural activity going on behind the closed doors of the Anderson factory, Grant knew that these would be the men to send on this vital mission. And President Grant's faith in these men was rewarded. Though it wasn't an easy fight, they were able to infiltrate and defeat the forces of the factory. They fought their way through Anderson's sadistic guards, through his menagerie of terrifying homemade monsters, and eventually, they got to Anderson himself. They were so appalled by the horrors they'd seen inside the factory, they couldn't stop themselves from torturing Anderson to death and dismembering his corpse. They freed the trapped workers and rooted out whatever remained of Anderson's forces within the building. However, this is where they made their first pivotal decision. Rather than simply destroying the sordid place and leaving it as rubble, they instead decided to utilize it and the many anomalous objects that it produced. This became the foundation of the Foundation. Over time, their organization grew, and the 05 Council was formed. They began spreading their influence and capturing anomalies all over. This was, however, until they engaged in a bloody war with the superior military forces of the Fae. Despite their augmented weaponry and tools from the factory, when the Fae performed an all-out assault against them, they were decimated. In his greatest shame, 05-1 fled the battlefield into the bowels of the factory, as his friends and allies were slaughtered by the Fae behind him. Eventually, after locking himself in a room with an ornate door, he encountered the true demonic heart of the factory, using Anderson's dismembered corpse as a mouthpiece. 05-1 struck a terrible deal with the factory. They wiped out the Fae entirely and reversed all the damage they had done. The SCP Foundation grew beyond the factory and eventually covered it in rubble out of shame. But the factory wasn't done. It is still very much alive and furious at being betrayed. It will keep producing deadly anomalous objects and creatures and releasing them out into the world until the Foundation pays what it owes in full. And the occasional sacrifice D-class researcher and guard won't cut it forever. Or at least that's how 05-1 tells it. It's a chilling story, but can it really be called a complete one? We wanted to find out for ourselves, which is why we asked every other member of the O5 Council to tell their side of the factory's tale. These are 12 tales about a factory. O5-2, upon being asked, went white as a sheet. He cleared his throat and made the admission that, in truth, the factory came back with him. As it turns out, O5-2 was a time traveler from the future. Back in his native time, an alternate timeline of the present, he was a mere researcher, until an accident led him to being completely unmoored from time. He was thrown all over the temporal landscape. He saw civilizations rise and fall. He took the time to hang out with Jesus. He was a pretty chill guy. And ultimately, he decided the best way to use his bizarre new condition was to help better the future with his knowledge. One piece of technology he brought back was a hyper-advanced piece of technology known as a nanofactory, which, as the name suggests, is a machine that uses nanobots to construct pretty much anything, like the ultimate futuristic 3D printer. It resulted in the creation of a huge number of futuristic items that helped the SCP Foundation along in their mission to secure, contain, and protect, including amnestics. However, what O5-2 didn't realize was that a rogue AI was also nested in the nanofactory, and the AI soon went berserk. As a result, the nanofactory became the factory, producing dangerous anomalies with reckless abandon, to the detriment of both the SCP Foundation and the world at large. On the whole, it was somewhat of a mixed bag. O5-3 seemed a little spaced out about even being asked. He claimed that he was there to witness the very birth of the factory, but it didn't happen in reality as we know it. It happened in cyberspace. He and his colleagues were very interested in the Matrix-esque journey of downloading their minds into computers back in the day, both for practical reasons and to play extremely immersive games of Doom. However, one day, something fundamentally changed. A new consciousness was born in then Soviet Russia. O5-3 and two of his companions, all operating in cyberspace, went to go check it out, along with a few helpful AI constructs. Eventually, they discovered it, an ever-expanding data packet that would transform into a powerful artificial consciousness known as the Factory, with mysterious motives and seemingly malicious intent. Something it more than proved when it erased the mind of one of O5-3's companions, killing him. Since this incident, the factory has only gotten more powerful. Its modus operandi is affecting machines in the real world and causing them to produce anomalous items, which then become the SCP Foundation's latest problems to deal with. O5-4 seemed both twitchy and indignant when the topic was brought up. They lamented the fact that the Foundation hadn't put more research into the factory and how to stop it, because technically it is their most dangerous and mysterious enemy group of interest. O5-4 explained it as follows. The FBI Unusual Incidents Unit is a joke. Are We Cool Yet is just a bunch of pretentious privileged rich kids. Marshall Carter and Dark Limited only care about money and thus can be bought off. The Global Occult Coalition often helps them take care of more challenging anomalies. The Church of the Broken God and the Sarkists are often too busy waging petty religious wars against each other to do real meaningful damage to the SCP Foundation. Prometheus Labs had already fallen, and Dr. Wondertainment wouldn't thrive forever. The factory, however, was a truly unknown quantity. It's just out there, somewhere, pumping out anomalies that soon become everyone else's very dangerous problem. O5-4 personally resented that the Foundation and their fellow council members don't see this and allocate more resources to the cause, because someday soon, it might really come back to bite them, as these things often do. O5-5 was considerably bitter, as in they denied that the factory ever even existed, claiming that the SCP Foundation made it up to cover up a bunch of anomalies that they themselves had created, and then told us to, F off, if you know what I mean. Some people get so hostile when you just want simple answers. Next came the tale of O5-6, which came in the form of a World War II espionage anecdote. Of course, this was also during the height of the Seventh Occult War, and Hitler, assisted by the Fuel Society and Obscura Corps, was trying to get his greasy little hands on as many anomalies as possible, in hopes of turning the tide of the war in his favor. O5-6 was working undercover behind enemy lines, disguised as an SS officer, as he slowly helped dismantle Hitler's anomalous offensive from within. He'd heard whisperings of the Nazis developing a weapon unlike any other, a factory that would produce anomalies for them on demand and give them the supernatural edge. 05-6 didn't believe it at first, until he was attacked by a group of vicious, living Punch and Judy dolls created by the factory. He narrowly managed to survive the ambush, but seemed disturbed in recounting the fact that when he destroyed the dolls, they bled profusely. Eventually, the leads he was following led him to a ruin at the base of Zugsputz. Inside, he discovered the ruin was hollow and filled with floating stone orbs, producing energy that allowed the Teal Society researchers to produce more anomalies. 05-6 was able to destroy this anomaly factory, but he took a souvenir. SCP-627, a little stone ball that rolls around on the ground when it comes into contact with people. 05-7 admitted somewhat sheepishly that while there was technically no real physical factory product anomalies are real, and they're all his fault. He purchased a bunch of random items from Walmart and printed a fake logo for the factory on the back. His plan was to give these totally innocent objects to junior researchers, both to mess with them for fun and to test their critical thinking skills. However, it turned out that simply placing this logo onto an item resulted in becoming an anomalous item. Admittedly, it was rough for 05-7 to have to follow the cool story about fighting magic Nazis. 05-8 made the far more exciting claim that the factory is actually all the way up on the moon. Back when the SCP Foundation were first founding Moonbase Alpha, they discovered that some ancient and unknown civilization had already built a covert base under the surface. It was a storehouse of anomalous alien technology. The first 13 people to enter were immediately vaporized by the laser defense system, but the fourth to enter was given an even worse fate. He was pulled into the machine and fused with it, at which point the factory was truly activated. It began to produce anomalies and transport them to random locations all across the globe, and it's been a problem ever since. When we spoke to 05-9 on the matter, with a steely look in his eye, he simply muttered the word, "Atlantis." No further comments were made on the matter. 05-10 explained that the factory was a single man, a truly ancient and brilliant anomalous craftsman that they found in a mountain temple in Tibet. He was taken by the Foundation and contained, but given far more high-tech tools to work his magic so they could keep reaping the anomalous fruits of his labors. However, the craftsman was appropriately crafty and managed to produce a duplicate of himself to distract the Foundation while he made an escape. He's still out there to this day, making more anomalies. A one-man factory. 05-11 claimed that the factory was alien in origin, but it wasn't on the moon. It was the true explanation for the iconic 1947 Roswell, New Mexico UFO incident. A flying saucer descended and offered 05-11, who was the commander of the response team at the time, the most wonderful things. This saucer became the factory. But humanity and 05-11 were deceived. It wasn't long before this extraterrestrial factory was producing countless deadly anomalous nightmares the world over, with nothing we could do about it. 05-12 said that the factory is a mess. It's a remnant of the Foundation's attempt to erase the supernatural from human belief. Foundation researchers claim that due to the inherent power in human belief, the belief in the supernatural gave it power, and phasing humanity as a whole out of this belief was a major factor in making sure things weren't much worse than they are today. However, some hardy things slip through the cracks, and because reality has a strange sense of humor, these things are marked with the logo of the factory. To round things off, we have a bonus take from the mysterious 05-13, who was instrumental in helping us put the rest of this video together. He claims that he created the factory, and that it acts as a kind of countermeasure against interdimensional invaders. While it may seem like the factory is creating anomalies, it's actually intercepting them and making them safer. Some anomalies that seem to come from the factory may be dangerous, but if 05-13 is to be believed, then they'd be a hell of a lot more dangerous if the factory wasn't here. And there you have it, folks. The story of the factory from every possible angle, even though it feels like each angle is facing in an entirely different direction. In the words of Oprah Winfrey, so what is the truth? Is there a nugget of reality beneath all of the fallacy? Or do you think the 05 Council was trolling all of us for even daring to ask? We leave that question to you, dear viewers. Let us know which theory you believe down in the comments below.
On May 12, 2588, the entity known as SCP-UBU manifested in Kangastak, Greenland, like something out of the most nightmarish kaiju movie never made. Soon after, there was no more death, but the world was filled with such chaos and despair that humanity longed for that eternal release. From its enormous stomping feet to its cloaca, to its face, featureless save for a gaping, grinning, devouring mouth, the entity was pure malice with all the time in the world. UBU decimated the planet, breaking the spirit of mankind and razing every city to the ground. In the earlier days of UBU's invasion, when there was still dry land and people still wanted to talk to each other rather than joining floating islands of eternal chemically induced slumber, they would commiserate about the shared misery of the state of things. "Oh, UBU? My daughter hasn't spoken to me ever since that monster shoved my whole body down her throat," someone would say. Another would pipe up, trying to one-up the first man in sort of a trauma Olympics. "Didn't you see me in the news? UBU carried me around for a week, snacking on me every now and then like I was his own personal turkey leg. It was hell. But honestly, part of me felt a little bummed out when he threw me away." Yet another person would chime in, like veterans swapping war stories over a drink at the bar. "UBU made me eat a pair of my pants, whole thing, zipper and all. Then he decided he thought that was funny, made me eat pair after pair after pair of them, rinse and repeat. By the time he got bored, I'd eaten probably around 20 pairs. I sort of got a taste for them after that." Everyone on the planet had good reason to despise SCP-UBU, but no one held more hate in his heart for the pale, wicked creature than Dr. Lawrence McLeod. Before the world was turned upside down, sometimes literally, Dr. McLeod was a member of the mysterious O5 Council at the SCP Foundation. To be specific, he was O5-11. But that prestigious position at the Foundation couldn't protect him or his loved ones from the wrath of UBU. When Dr. McLeod was off duty, UBU attacked him and his wife. First, it impaled his wife on a broom handle. Next, it threw Dr. McLeod into an open pool of sewage in the street. Then, it bathed him in the filthy water, using his screaming wife as a scrubbing brush, all the while whistling a horrible little bathtub song. Centuries after that awful experience, as Dr. McLeod watched most of his colleagues give up and choose the closest thing to death in this broken world, he became even more determined to do something about it. On January 14, 3030, Dr. McLeod abandoned the SCPS Naismith and his fellow O5 Council members in search of the SCPS Corncrake, an abandoned craft to the southeast. It wasn't an easy journey, rowing all the way there in a lifeboat, never knowing when the great white beast would emerge from the water and choose him as its next unfortunate plaything. He could see the SCPS Corncrake still floating there, untouched. But before he could row any closer, something collided with the lifeboat from below, snapping it in half. Dr. McLeod's stomach dropped at the sight of pale flesh, but it was soon replaced with relief when he saw that the thing that had broken his lifeboat was not, in fact, UBU. It was an injured narwhal, behaving erratically due to its wounds. The culprit was almost certainly UBU. It wasn't content to just torment humans, but instead must have been targeting any life form that could feel pain and fear. In his own words, Dr. McLeod had put it, "At least a mass extinction wouldn't have made it that personal." After the lifeboat broke apart, McLeod swam to the Corncrake, exhaustion and cold straining his muscles. It took him 2 hours to reach the abandoned cargo barge and containment site, but eventually he managed to climb up over the side and get on board. There was one very special thing about the Corncrake, the thing that made it worth crossing the ocean in a fragile little lifeboat to find. Every anomaly that made the Ganymede list, the list of anomalies considered too dangerous to abandon, even in an apocalyptic scenario, was contained on the Corncrake. If there was anything left that the Foundation, or anyone else, hadn't tried to use to defeat UBU, it would be on that ship. After taking a little while to recover, Dr. McLeod embarked on an initial exploration of the craft. All the staff were gone, as he had expected. Thankfully, he still had his O5 ID card, and it still worked like a charm, unlocking all of the automated security systems on board. A lot of what he found was in ruins, but some things had survived. He found 10 hominid replicators from SCP-2000 in perfect working order. There was a cage containing the remains of SCP-2845, the deer, though UBU had done significant damage to it. SCP-319, a curious device, was there, contained in the space-locked vacuum chamber. This one was notable for its potential ability to destroy the universe. He found a couple of safe-class anomalies, such as SCP-YEZ, crowd control for the practical optimist, and SCP-FNA, the portable warehouse. The latter of the two was a portable door frame to a pocket dimension. He also stumbled upon SCP-001, Last Ride of the Day, an old Prometheus Labs prototype of a time machine. And possibly, most importantly, he found SCP-076. The coffin was open, but Abel didn't attack Dr. McCloud. He wasn't consumed with murderous rage and bloodlust, the way he always was before. Instead, he was just sitting on the edge of the ship, silently staring at the sea. When he spotted McCloud, he gave him a small wave and did nothing else. The centuries of a world without death, a world without killing, without victory in battle, had taken its toll on him. For possibly the first time in his eternal life, Abel was depressed. 9 days after he first inspected the corncrake, McCloud began to formulate a plan. He loaded all of the hominid receptors into SCP-FNA, using a thankfully still working forklift. Next, he was able to unseal the sealed portion of SCP-001, Last Ride of the Day, and get his hands on the details of the anomaly. It read, SCP-001 is capable of temporarily relocating to its relative position 15,000 years prior to activation. This temporal displacement is divergent paradox irrelevant. In other words, a separate timeline is created as a landing point. For example, if an occupant from timeline X were to murder their parents in utero in timeline Y, the Y iteration of the occupant would no longer exist, but the occupant themselves, being from X, would be unharmed. When in a fully active state, SCP-001 deploys a 5-meter-high telescopic antenna that functions as a Coloco wave energy sink. Essentially, Coloco waves could only be produced as a byproduct of the universe suddenly being exterminated, and ZK-class reality failures produce the most Coloco waves. In one of these scenarios, SCP-001 would be able to use these waves to go back in time 15,000 years, effectively resetting reality to a point far before the catastrophe happened. This information allowed him to put his plan together, to resurrect Project Beluga. Step 1. Plant explosive charges around SCP-319. Step 2. Hide anything potentially useful against SCP-UBU inside of SCP-FNA. Step 3. Get into the cockpit with SCP-FNA in tow. Step 4. Raise the Coloco sink. And Step 5. Blow the whole thing up. 3 days later, it was time to put the plan into motion. Dr. McCloud placed the charges around SCP-319's vacuum chamber. There was enough in place to implode the walls of the vacuum chamber. He closed the bulkhead and began deploying the Coloco sink. 10%, 25%, 30%. Suddenly, he could hear a loud crashing sound. The ship began to tilt. Oh no. He could hear the distant sound of menacing giggles. The sink reached 45, 57, but as UBU grew closer, he quickly overrode the system to lower the sink. 45%, 30%, 25%, 10%. UBU grew closer and closer, and as it approached, it began to whistle the tune it once used when it bathed McCloud and his wife in the sewer. UBU began to pound against the blast door, becoming increasingly frustrated as it struggled to break through. Suddenly, another voice cut through the air, an unexpected one. SCP-076 Abel called out to McCloud, encouraging him to carry on while Abel held the beast back. As Abel and UBU engaged in an epic battle, McCloud suddenly remembered something. There was an express deployment module for the Coloco sink. With no time to waste, he activated it. All at once, he hit the detonator, and then, the year was 11,970, and the date was February 14th. 13,963 years later, the SCP Foundation discovered something beneath a mound of earth and snow near the northern border of Lapland, Finland. It was a shipping container with a reinforced exterior, the interior of which could only be accessed through a fortified bulkhead on one side. The words SCP-001 were written on the side in black paint. In spite of this, the object was given the designation SCP-8048.
A narrow, winding tunnel through the mound of earth and snow was discovered, leading from the door to the outside world. The tunnel had significant wear, clearly having been used as a footpath by someone. But who? Well, on April 12, 1993, the Foundation got their answer. SCP-8048's bulkhead opened, and a man stepped out, snapping his fingers and promptly sealing the door behind him. He was designated Pol 8048. He was a 32-year-old man of French-Canadian descent, answering to the name of Dr. Lawrence Michaud. He made a series of claims that the Foundation found dubious, but noted it in the official file for SCP-8048 just the same. These included, but were not limited to, SCP-8048 is a time machine. He held the office of 05-11 in the year 3030 from an alternate timeline. Said timeline experienced a modified Omega-K class end-of-death scenario that coincided with the invasion of a Tiamat-class anomaly known as SCP-UBU. SCP-UBU was an extremely dangerous and sadistic entity who was capable of, among other things, neutralizing SCP-169 and SCP-682. His timeline's version of the Foundation launched Project Beluga, which resulted in an impossible war with SCP-UBU that lasted 441 years. Pol 8048 deliberately sabotaged SCP-319 to act as a power source for SCP-8048, thus arriving in Lapland in the year 11,970 BCE. SCP-UBU will arrive in Greenland on May 12, 2588. Pol 8048 was able to extend his lifespan by sharing his consciousness between a central computer within SCP-8048 and several thousand bodies created by his personal hominid replicators. Said consciousness sharing was achieved through a book classified in the future as SCP-YEZ. He wishes to assist the Foundation in the termination of SCP-UBU and has laid out a plan for its termination as outlined in Document 8048-Zeta. There were, of course, concerns about the man's legitimacy, but after Michaud mentioned over 104 specific terms and data points known only to members of the O5 Council, the Foundation was forced to take him at least a little bit seriously. A motion was filed, requesting that Pol 8048 be allowed to assist the Foundation with the termination of SCP-UBU as per Document 8048-Zeta. O5-4 voted yay, O5-7 abstained, and the rest of the Council voted nay. The motion failed to pass. A follow-up motion was filed in response, requesting that Pol 8048 be allowed to assist the Foundation with their own strategy to respond to SCP-UBU. O5-1, O5-4, O5-7, and O5-10 abstained from voting. The rest voted nay. The motion failed to pass. On April 14, 1995, Dr. Isaiah Henderson and Pol 8048 sat down for an interview. When asked to state his name, Dr. Michaud also recited a mimetic passphrase that, when spoken by anyone other than O5-11 of past or present, would cause them to burst into flames. The two men were at odds from the beginning. Dr. Michaud expressed dismay and frustration that his proposal was rejected. Meanwhile, Dr. Henderson countered with the insistence that Michaud's proposed plan was rejected for posing an unnecessary risk to the civilian public. They debated for a moment, before Dr. Henderson announced the Foundation's next plan of action. Dr. Michaud was to be terminated. The Foundation would proceed with its plans without him. At that point, Dr. Henderson terminated Michaud as ordered. He didn't count on one thing, though. Michaud was no longer an ordinary man, bound to one body. He hopped into the body of a guard, then into the body of O5-4 to deliver a vital message. He had started this plan alone, and was ready to bring it to a close alone. Project Beluga would continue with or without the Foundation's support. Dr. Michaud returned to the bulkhead, climbing back inside and sealing it behind him. He had hoped to have the Foundation behind him. He had hoped they would be allies in the fight against the greatest evil mankind ever encountered, but they disappointed him. He had waited thousands of years, only for the organization he devoted his life to try and kill him. Well, he wasn't going to go down without a fight. This was bigger than the Foundation, bigger than anyone, and no living person was as equipped to handle UBU as he was. So he resumed Project Beluga as a one-man operation. He issued a mission statement, which read as follows. On May 12, 2588, the entity known as SCP-UBU invaded and pillaged human civilization for no other motivation than cruelty and selfish gratification. Shortly thereafter, Project Beluga was founded as a joint effort between the Global Occult Coalition and the SCP Foundation for the purposes of UBU's destruction.
UBU is not merely a threat to human safety. He's an affront to every positive and loving concept in the human consciousness. Rather than our lives, he seeks to destroy our quality of life to sate his own sick desires. Think about it. The taste of ice cream, playing with your dog, the way you felt after your first kiss. That is UBU's sworn enemy. No fate is too cruel for him. No hatred is strong enough. When Project Beluga's charter was signed, 592 GOC officers and Foundation staff were present at the ceremony. Our troops numbered in the hundreds of thousands. I, Dr. Lawrence Michaud, am the only surviving member, and always will be. What I lack in numbers is compensated thousandfold by my weapons, my mind, my replicated bodies, and eons of experience. The following record serves one purpose alone, that once justice has been brought to UBU, humans in the shining and golden UBU-free future will understand that one person can accomplish through the power of hard science and raw emotion entwined in a perfect and indestructible braid. And while we are at it, you are very welcome. Over the next several hundred years, McLeod worked to secure ownership of Kangastock, Greenland through a Project Beluga civilian front. He evacuated the civilian population from the area, then spent a century constructing a superweapon. With 100 high-yield nuclear weapons, heat amplification runes, a targeting beacon for SCP-DAG, and 5 antimatter-gathering pods from SCP-HNM in place, he was finally ready for UBU to manifest again.
It almost goes without saying that the inner workings of the SCP Foundation are kept secret from the general population. Your average Joe doesn't need or want to know about the terrifying entities and bizarre experiments happening behind the closed doors of the various Foundation research sites. But there are some secrets of the SCP Foundation that even its own staff know very little about. One such mystery is the highly classified and immensely powerful O5 Council, or Overwatch Council, that oversees everything that goes on within the SCP Foundation. They are considered the highest authority within the organization, but very little is known about them. In fact, according to one official report in the SCP Foundation archives, the O5 Council does not exist at all. Stick with me here. There are decades of reports concerning the Council. There is a wealth of historical evidence pointing to their existence and influence, but they do not definitively exist. At least they don't right now. Take a deep breath, try and untangle the knots we just tied in your brain, sit back, and listen. This is the story of SCP-001, the O5 Council itself. In 1965, SCP Foundation Administrator William Cohen was preparing to leave his position. To prepare his successor, H.V. Oleander, Administrator Cohen drafted a series of letters intended to pass on important and highly guarded knowledge to the man who would take his place. In the letter, Administrator Cohen explained that he was retiring early for a specific reason, writing, "A darkling's to my mind, sticking to every neuron and slowing my every thought. In truth, I am unwell." Cohen's decline had begun 8 years prior, in late 1957, after the launch of Soviet space probe Sputnik 1 into the Earth's orbit. The Foundation's interest had been drawn to the probe after a foreign signal had been detected trying to communicate with it. Not a signal from a foreign nation, mind you, but something from much further away, and likely something that was not human. Whatever it was trying to communicate, and it was getting closer. On January 4th, 1958, the signal stopped and an unidentified object arrived on Earth. Cohen was summoned to the war room at Site 00 much to his surprise. It was highly unusual for guests to be invited to the site. There they worked together to identify the nature of the situation with Sputnik, until a single burst of gamma radiation was detected and Sputnik's orbit began to decay. The Council panicked, calling heads of state and calling for as many resources as possible. They had worked themselves into a frenzy and were planning to shoot down the first space probe in Earth's history. Eventually, the decision was placed in Cohen's hands. Let the probe land on its own or shoot it down. Overwhelmed by the Council's intensity, Cohen told them to do what they thought was best. They shot it down. He did not want to, but he crumbled under the pressure. There were so many of them and only one of him, and they seemed so certain in their decision. This was the first decision in his career that Cohen regretted, and it was presumably followed by many more. He continued in his letter saying, "And now what credibility do I have left to disagree with them? I am but a mouthpiece, a sad old puppet tangled up and caught in the very strings used to make him dance." Cohen wrote his letter to his successor with one warning. "Just as I have shown you vulnerability here in the hopes I might gain your trust, please consider asking the same from those who would insist you trust them." In March of 1958, following the incident with Sputnik, the O5 Council collectively submitted a notice to the Foundation's Leadership Committee. They stated simply, "The individual you call your administrator has proven insufficient. We solicit you to make your preparations and nominate another." No individual members of the Council wrote in, but rather submitted their thoughts as a collective, as if thinking together as one single mind. The language used was also curious, saying "your administrator" rather than "our administrator." The O5 Council seemed to think of itself as something separate from the SCP Foundation, its own entity rather than simply a powerful arm or leader of the organization itself. On June 11, 1962, another notice was sent out. It read, "Foundation, a life lived in service of the greater good is invalidated if death does not also serve." On November 11, 1965, a third notice was sent out, this time to all Foundation staff. "Please join us in remembering the life and career of Administrator William Cohen. The only constant is change. Because of this, the erosion of his skills, abilities, knowledge, and confidence was inevitable." Administrator H.V. Oleander took over the position for many years after Cohen's demise. In 1988, he prepared to step down and drafted a letter to his successor, Natalia Ellingbrook. Like Cohen before him, Oleander tried his best to explain where he went wrong, in the hope that she might do better. Oleander began the letter. "I used to have such an ego. This job, this life, and the burdens that surround it crush and squeeze you until all you have left is what they force you to keep. My mind and my soul feel as though they've been contorted into the shape of someone I no longer recognize. My predecessor, may he rest in peace, described his years as if he were trapped behind smoky glass and made to watch a foggy world pass him by. Like some sort of voyeur, I too feel imprisoned, but I realize that it was never a looking glass. It is a mirror." The events detailed in the letter began in November of 1985, after a powerful storm had ripped through New England and caused severe damage to Site 31's power grid. During the power outage, a multi-stage containment breach occurred and an unnamed infovore escaped from the facility. The entity was lost until March of 1986, when it was detected in a government facility in Warsaw, Poland. Determined to make up for his previous failure, Oleander organized a mission to bring the entity back into custody. His team tracked it down and was prepared to apprehend the entity's host, when the O5 Council expressed concern that this behavior might cause an international incident and intervened. The Council made the decision to reach out to local and international governments in Poland, allowing the entity to escape to Pripyat, Ukraine. Oleander and the Council went head-to-head on this, pushing and pulling and becoming increasingly aggressive on either side. Oleander could not make up his mind about what to do, listen to the Council, or trust his own gut. On April 26, 1986, his indecision resulted in a nuclear disaster in Soviet territory. Not only that, but the entity still evaded containment. The mission was a complete failure. The O5 Council submitted a report on the incident stating, "We recommended that the healing process commence by first assigning blame. The collective good would be served by purging liability. And we would have helped. Anyone would have helped. Why deny it?" By now, the pattern has probably become clear to you. The administrator and the council fall into conflict over a difficult decision. Something goes horribly wrong, a new administrator is chosen, the former administrator writes them a letter to prepare them for the heavy demands of the job, and the cycle begins again. As you might expect during those days of her administration, Oleander's replacement, Natalie Ellingbrook, sat down to write a letter of warning to one Michelle Wilkes, who was chosen to replace her. Ellingbrook began her letter. "As you've likely surmised from our few meetings, I walk with a pronounced limp and favor my left leg. How I came to be like this isn't especially interesting, but what it did to me might be of interest to a person in your position. Any man or woman changes when they are exposed to pain. Simply put, it has to go somewhere. If you hold it all within yourself, it may stay contained, but it will surely destroy you when you've had your fill. It festers in all the spaces you let it occupy, warping and scarring what used to be healthy, happy tissue sat beneath. Some people have hobbies, but me, I've always just had my work. I've been ringside for so much pain in my time with the Foundation. My predecessor left me a note, much like I am leaving you, and in it he warned me of the tremendous duty and guilt he hid in order to do his job. Although the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune stung him quite keenly, I assure you I have suffered every bit his equal. The breach at the Olympics in '94, losing control of Site 248 in '96, botched facility transfer of Hong Kong in '97, bombings in Bali in '02, the dispute with the ORIA in the Congo in '03, the GOC ultimatum in '04. She continued. Although I have weathered much, my tenure is up not with the sort of precipitating bang that ousted Oleander, but rather the quiet whimper of stepping away from a battle I no longer wish to fight. I am tired of the council calling a meeting on every decision I try to make, and I'm tired of calling one on every decision they try to make without me. I guess that reasoning is another tribute to the selfish life I have led. My ideal way to say goodbye would have been to simply stop coming in. My desk would have sat empty, emails unread, until one day a courier showed up with my keys and badge. But even here, at the end of my career, the O5 Council insists on refusing to let me be by myself. So tomorrow I will play the part of a dutiful officer resigning her post and walk away from Site 00 with my head held high and those overbearing bastards in the rearview mirror. I pray that your head will never be so bowed as mine has. Administrator Wilkes took her predecessor's words to heart and began her tenure with a new proposal for Project Tethys. The project would include modifications to the Three Gorges Dam facility at the Yangtze River. As part of a containment procedure for Entity 2005-C-ET-011, the Council refused to approve her proposal. Administrator Wilkes insisted that they provide a list of concerns, explaining what their issues with their proposal were. The two argued back and forth over the necessity of a meeting until the Council submitted this note to her. We know how important it is to get off on the right foot. Although this body respects you and the autonomy which you command, we have also seen many come and go. You were chosen from your peers, but they have chosen many others in the past. We remain unconvinced. Before you, Allingbrook, who spent her whole life pushing others aside so she could lead. She left all others behind. Trees with no roots do not hold to the ground. Before her, Oleander, who wanted so much to be seen as your hero in white. He could no longer live with himself once his clothes were stained, but the sin does not define the saint. Before him, Cohen, who wanted nothing more than to be the one who made the decisions. He collapsed in on himself when there was no easy victory. No man is an island, and a dozen more whose names we have subrogated. You need us. You are not enough. Administrator Wilkes was offended by this response and argued that the meeting was unnecessary. She asked for the Council to trust her expertise and the expertise of her employees. They responded, "Your distinctiveness did not arise from the ether. You are a synthesis of available materials and experiences. If needed, another could be synthesized. We are needed. We are necessary. We synthesize. You are not. You cannot. Become we, or become they. The choice is yours." Administrator Wilkes suddenly understood. The Council was not a part of the Foundation. They were something else entirely. Though she couldn't be completely sure what they were, she knew one thing for certain. They were not her friends. She fired back at the Council's threats. "You cast your shadow over the future with your threats and intimidation. Certain we would be nothing without you. But I'm forced to wonder, who or what would you be without us? I stand with the countless thousands that have died for our mission. The people that have engineered our solutions, the people that will build them, and the people that will risk their lives in order to carry out these procedures in the hope our mission might one day be complete.
Without them, I know I would be nothing. We are willing to take our chances without you. I'm going to offer you the same choice you gave me. Become we or become they.
Several days passed with no response, and Administrator Wilkes made the most difficult decision of her career. She suspended the appointment of the O5 Council until a day comes when it becomes necessary again. Secure Area 00 has been set up around the area containing SCP-001. The area has been classified, designated Level 6 or Cosmic Secret. The coordinates of this secure area are stored in cranial implants placed in 15 carefully selected Foundation leaders, including Ethics Committee members and site directors. These candidates can participate in voting once a vote is called, but are to be kept unaware of their status as voters until it becomes necessary. If a supermajority votes to decrypt the contents of these cranial implants, the location of Secure Area 00 will be revealed to them. If the security of these implants becomes compromised, Cogita.aic will generate a new protocol, and a new list of candidates will be selected. The original candidates will have the encrypted information deleted from their minds. No one may access Secure Area 00 at any time for any reason, unless the aforementioned vote takes place. Operation protocols, defenses, building schematics, and all other information about the site have been expunged from Foundation records. What's this? A new addendum has been unlocked. This is for your eyes and ears only. Yes, I'm talking to you. Do not share this information with anyone else. A retinal scan has confirmed your identity, and the Cogito protocol has been executed. You are receiving this addendum because Administrator Michelle Wilkes is dead after nearly 20 years of service. Before her death, she prepared a statement regarding the role of administrator at the Foundation. The addendum contains a message from Administrator Michelle Wilkes to you, her designated successor. Surprise! You have been chosen as the next administrator for the SCP Foundation. You may be surprised, asking, "Really? Me?" Yes, you. You may not know it, but you were chosen quite some time ago. The cranial implant has been in place for years. Now it is ready to be activated. Michelle Wilkes' message is intended to prepare you for the trials and tribulations that lie ahead, and to encourage you to ask yourself, what kind of leader will you be? Are you willing to do whatever it takes to perform this most solemn duty? The following comes from the former administrator herself. Listen carefully and consider what she has to say. Your future at the Foundation, the fate of your subordinates, and your very legacy may depend on it. Consider now, before fate takes away the luxury of time, what type of person, co-worker, and leader you want to be. Each and every day, one of the administrators before me was challenged in terms both great and small during their tenures, and I was no exception to this pattern. The office you occupy is not about the power and influence you now command, nor is it ever about the unfathomable responsibility you must now shepherd. It is instead about the character, integrity, and vision with which you will meet the test of leadership, and should you prove worthy, surmount it. You and the people you will lead must be asked to undertake tasks no person should ever be asked to carry out. Yet duty and the safety of all mankind demand that you make this sacrifice. For them, for each other. If your resolve should ever falter, know that everyone you lead stands with you. We are ready to follow you into the blackest night if you let us believe in the promise of dawn. But should your resolve ever break, the Council awaits. They will invite you to Site 00 if you ask. You need only surrender. Best wishes, M. Wilkes, former administrator. What exactly is the O5 Council? That is a question not easily answered. They are not flesh and blood, not individual minds and feelings, but something else entirely. They are a collective, something that thinks, breathes, and votes together as one being. They view the world as two things, we and they. As you prepare to take on the role of administrator, keep in mind who you are. Be strong, be brave, be resolute, and hold on to your sense of right and wrong. But if you ever should falter, if you decide to stop being you and become we, there is always Site 00. Remember, even though they do not officially exist, the Council awaits. Now go check out SCP-001 The Gate Guardian and SCP-001 The Black Moon for more enigmatic SCP-001 proposals.